A new face has emerged this week amongst the regular portrait gallery of political fame. The face of someone who is politically neutral is the face of a dead man. Lumumba has risen from the status of a powerful living prime minister to that of the assassinated hero of Africa.
The body of an important personality, the things we do for them. Here I have what's left of a very important historical figure. Here it is.
Did it fall off, or did you...
I pulled it off. He had very good teeth. They're covered in gold at the back. A dentist knows how to identify that. I've had to swear to many things because of Lumumba, and I'm still doing so now.
What did you have to swear?
Lumumba? Just think for a minute. When someone comes to tell you, we've killed Lumumba and you have to get rid of him, in a country which isn't your own. So, Patrice, this is all that's left of you.
How and why was Patrice Lumumba murdered 40 years ago? One man who must know is the Belgian colonial official and diplomat, Jacques Bressine.
He was dangerous for us, in the sense that he wasn't open to the kind of solutions we sometimes wanted to apply.
Another man who played a central role in the fall of the Congolese politician was Louis Malière, a colonel in the Belgian Secret Service.
Lumumba chose the wrong side. Of course, he was more or less a communist, and he chose the Russian side rather than the West.
Virginia, USA. This is where CIA agent Larry Devlin lives. He was the man the American government entrusted with the murder of Lumumba.
Lumumba was a danger for both the Congo and the rest of the world, in the sense that he was allowing the Soviets to come in, and we were certainly believed that there was a very good chance that they would take over control of the Congo.
40 years after independence, the country with its huge Congo River is still being torn apart by civil war. Mobutu's long dictatorship plundered its riches, and the mineral wealth so viciously fought over has dried up. Congo's Minister of Culture is the daughter of the country's first Prime Minister.
Lumumba has become the symbol of nationalism in this country, and has become the symbol of the struggle for independence. And since he also died a tragic death for his ideas, sacrificing himself to pursue those ideas to the very end, I think that is what he left us. And also, for years and years, we couldn't really talk about Lumumba. It was practically forbidden here. People need to know about him and what happened. It's their history, which isn't very old, only 40 years. There's this great desire to know the fathers of our independence, but they're not well enough known.
Lumumba's house in Kinshasa, or Leopoldville as it was known then. In 1960, when the Congo became independent, it was for a few months at the center stage of world politics. Patrice Lumumba, the country's first prime minister.
The masses who are waiting for us tomorrow want more than just the votes they have obtained today. They want bread and progress. We need to be able to build this nation.
There were headlines throughout the entire summer. 200 days later, the show was over. Roland, Lumumba's youngest son, was not even 3 years old when he saw his father for the last time.
We must know exactly who did it, how and why. We have the right to know. It's our duty to pass this knowledge on to the future generations, to our children and the children of our children.
Lumumba's typewriter, a souvenir from the only friend he had in Belgium, Jean Van Lierde, a rebellious Christian and anti-colonialist. He tried in vain to act as an intermediary between Lumumba and the Belgian government.
Patrice was such a free man, and people found it so original to see a black man who didn't lick the feet of the colonialists that they instinctively perceived him as a threat. And it was that freedom of his which turned him into a kind of meteorite, flashing through the sky, and then he disappeared.
The first Europeans to arrive in the Congo called it the Heart of Darkness. In 1955, when King Baudouin visited the country, the colonial order still seemed secure. But millions of Congolese had paid with their lives during the 80 years of Belgian rule. A chance appearance of Patrice Lumumba in the background of an old newsreel. Within 5 years, this unknown post office worker had become the leader of an unstoppable independence movement.
The objective we are pursuing is the liberation of the Congo from the colonial regime and the total emancipation of the country. We are certain that we know exactly where we are going. The independence of the Congo doesn't mean driving the Belgians out or breaking with Belgium. Quite the opposite. We want to form a sovereign government, which will provide a place for everyone in a country where Congolese and Belgians will be able to work hand in hand in the service of the Congolese nation.
Lumumba, the Pan-African, with his MNC party, won a surprise victory in the first free elections. The Belgians reluctantly handed over the government to him. His closest rival, C.O.W.S, became president of the young independent states.
We are honored to present to the Parliament of the Congo the first Congolese government as follows. Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, your humble servant, Lumumba.
The first clash came at the independence celebrations.
Gentlemen, the independence of the Congo is the crowning moment of the mission conceived by the genius of King Leopold II, undertaken by him with courageous tenacity and pursued with great perseverance by Belgium.
King Baudouin made a speech in which he exalted the role of Belgium, talking about everything Belgium had brought to the Congo. He said we had arrived at a moment when Belgium had decided to grant the Congo its independence, and that this was well and good. I would say it was a classic speech for such circumstances. C.O.W.S made a speech thanking King Baudouin. He talked about the Congo and the future. It was a good speech, too.
It is with deepest humility that I have prayed to God to protect our people and enlighten all its leaders.
And all the time these two, Baudouin and C.O.W.S, were talking, I could see Patrice was writing away, correcting his speech.
Lumumba hadn't been scheduled to speak. The whole international press was there. Suddenly he got up, walked to the tribune, and made a speech.
Lumumba's speech came as a shock. Nobody was expecting it, and it shocked lots of Belgians. He systematically condemned Belgian colonization. He repeated all the harshest anti-colonial accusations. We'd cut off people's hands, we'd enslaved them, and all that sort of thing.
You who have fought for independence and are today victorious, I salute you in the name of the Congolese government. I salute all my friends who fought relentlessly at our sides. We have been subjected to insults and sarcasms, to the blows we had to endure from morning to night just because we were Africans. We learned that the law was never the same according to whether it was applied to whites or blacks. Who will ever forget the shootings or the barbarous jail cells awaiting those who refuse to submit to this regime of injustice, oppression, and exploitation?
That was really the decisive moment when he made that famous speech on the 30th of June 1960. A lot of people then said he signed his death warrant with that speech because the Belgian government didn't want him. Not just because of the 30th of June speech, but because he was Patrice Lumumba, and he didn't fit in with the hopes of the Belgians and Americans and many people in business.
Only 5 days after the founding of the new state, a revolt broke out in the army. The black troops rebelled against their Belgian officers who had no intention of abandoning their command. Crisis in the Congo took over the headlines in the world's press.
In diesem Wagen wurde der italienische Konsul in Leopoldville ermordet.
The Italian consul in Leopoldville was murdered in this car. Terror and destruction are now the features of a freedom which many believe to be premature. Whites are fleeing mobs who have been whipped up to anger. The Belgian government is sending paratroops into the Congo.
In the copper-rich province of Katanga, Lumumba's opponent, Chombi, called on the Belgians for help too, in order to disarm the troops. Less than 10 days after their withdrawal, colonial soldiers triumphantly returned to the former colony. René Small went to Katanga as an officer in the military secret service.
If it hadn't been for the courage of that small number of Belgian officers and NCOs in containing the blacks and preventing them from overrunning the town, then it would have been horrible.
The Elizabethville mutiny was over in 24 hours thanks to the Belgians.
The rebellion started on July 9th and lasted till the 10th. It was on the 11th at 5 p.m. that we declared independence.
This was the Katangan secession. Chombi, known locally as Mr. Cash Register, declared himself president of the separatist province. But he was a president installed by the Belgians.
Elizabethville was above all a center for important financial interests. That was where the Union Minière, the mining company, was. Obviously, Belgian financial circles also wanted to keep their hands on that.
One of the major figures in the breakaway state was the Minister of Finance, Jean-Baptiste Kibwe.
As soon as we took over, the mining company, l'Union Minière, continued to export copper, and the revenue from this went into the Katanga National Bank.
Chombi's chief aide was a Belgian lawyer, Jacques Barthelus.
The mining company now paid its taxes and license fees to the Katangan government, not to Leopoldville. So the Katangans had plenty of money, and this enabled them to equip the Katangan gendarmes and buy weapons and armored vehicles. There were arms merchants continually visiting Chombi's home to try and sell him arms.
Chombi's white mercenaries defending the free world in the heart of Africa soon became known as les affreux. literally the dreadful men.
Indépendance, cha-cha, tozulie. Oti kwanza, cha-cha, tubakidi. Otableron, cha-cha, baganyeo. Oti kwanza, cha-cha, tozulie. Indépendance, cha-cha, tozulie. Oti kwanza, cha-cha, tubakidi. Otableron, cha-cha, baganyeo. Oti kwanza.
Katherine, Massey, Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information for non-white people on the global system of white supremacy racism. Today's date, Friday, December 12, 2024. So I have been told. This is our penultimate installment on Andrée Blouin's My Country, Africa. We will wrap things up next Thursday. First of all, the song that is playing in the background, importantly, Independence Cha-Cha-Cha, the Congolese independence song. This tune is in the film aptly named Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. And when I was in Los Angeles, Johan Grimonpré was also in LA. When the Q&A happened after the film, he talked about the significance of this song specifically. He went into detail about the black artists, musicians, paying attention to all the things that were happening. Patrice Lumumba and racists globally conspiring against him, and them thinking they were going to be so-called independent. Them going to make this song, and just wow. And this song is going to be mentioned in the book this week. Important to white people can't have black people focusing their talents in a constructive manner. Anyway, the audio that we heard at the beginning, different documentary film from some years ago titled Death, Colonial Style, The Execution of Patrice Lumumba. White people have made a lot of documentaries and books. Man, they have written books all over the world. There's a whole section at the library, university on the Congo that is massive. It's way bigger than the lynching section on niggers in the States, which staggered me for a second. It really made me think, like, wait a minute, we're in Washington State where they had purges of so-called non-white people, Asians, concentration camps and all of that. How can it be that the section on the Congo and Patrice Lumumba is bigger than the section on lynching niggers? But it is. Anyway, the documentary, Death, Colonial Style, it starts off with a white man. I told you, I got Patrice Lumumba teeth in my pocket. Boy, I told last week, she said, oh, his teeth are beautiful. Yes, they are. And after we done dumped you in sulfuric acid, might not be left but a few of your teeth. And I'm going to keep them as a reminder. Come on. Now, even that pronoun, we, didn't want him. Who is we exactly that didn't want Lumumba? And you know what their code name was for Lumumba? Satan. What in the world? What in the world? We didn't want him. He was bad for our interests. He was danger. He was dangerous. Dangerous to whom? You heard that from Larry Delvin. White man, powerful white man. I believe he worked for the CIA. Has written book. He wrote a whole book about his time in the Congo alone. Chief of Station, Congo. Andrée Blouin is mentioned in that book, as a matter of fact. They mentioned the June 1960 summertime speech that allegedly got him killed, where he went into details. They said he had to bring up all this old stuff about chopping off hands and starving black people. Yeah, who wants to hear? Incidentally, they were still chopping off niggers' hands in 1960, but whatever. They say that about 5 times in that one documentary. That's only 60 minutes. That signed his death warrant. He signed his death warrant for that. Oh yeah, he signed his death warrant. It reminded me, in the more recent documentary, Soundtrack to Coup d'etat, there is a receipt where they have a direct quote and the source saying, "Do not send any more killers. We have enough people to kill Lumumba." And they just leave that on the screen for about 10 seconds, which is a long time in a movie. They're like, it's no animation, it's no background, they just put that on the screen. Do not send any more killers. We have enough people to kill Lumumba. Got it. You heard they said this was Lumumba's white friend, Jan van Lierde, Lierde. That they didn't. Why was Lumumba Satan? Why didn't they want him? Why did white people find it necessary to kill Lumumba and keep his teeth in a jar for a half century? Because according to his white friend, Jan van Lierde, he said because Lumumba didn't lick the feet of whites. What? Is that what is required of a non-white person to be liked, so-called, by white people? I got to lick the feet, not massage, not clean, not moisture. I got to lick the feet of whites. And if I don't want to do that, got old Satan over here. Much less you start talking about they done chopped off our feet, chopped off hands, which is all true. Probably still doing that to get that iPhone. When they began talking about Katanga succession and the minerals, Apple and all the mining corporations and them paying money to Katanga, that should be so memorable. They got big terms for the balkanization, but white people go in and cause chaos and then see if they can chop the whole country up. Now we got North Vietnam and South Vietnam. All that old type of nonsense. North Korea, South Korea, that old type of nonsense. No one does it better than white people. And then fund both sides sometimes. Oh, they said that all sorts of arms. Who are these people selling arms? Are they dark people? Are these Lumumba's cousins? Or Joseph Mobutu's brothers? I was thinking, is that Jim Jones? Oh, then when they said that the term, the les Afro-Fuhrer, however you said, the dreadful men. Is that Jim Jones? All these white killers coming in. Is that Jim Jones? Didn't we start the year talking about that? Is that Jim Jones going over in Africa? I'm going to call, we trained to get Lumumba. I'm going to kill some black people. Might even keep some teeth. Grab me a monkey while I'm here. We will get to it. Andrée Blouin, My Country, Africa. Second to last session. We're picking up, remember last week we had the cliffhanger. They were coming to kill her too, maybe. She had to flee. Remember we were talking about why did she go to Rome? And oh my gosh, cliffhanger. My Country, Africa. Katherine Massey Book Club, Part 1.
The ambassador knew which hotel I was in because he had been at the airport when I arrived. His car had followed the airport bus. As a matter of discretion, he had not sought to join me or asked me to ride with him. When he saw me get off, he knew where I was staying. "I'll come for you in 5 minutes," he said. "Don't leave the hotel. Don't talk to anyone. Just pack. I'll come to get you. Your life is in danger. There's not a minute to lose." Fortunately, I had very few things to pack. "You have an uncomfortable place in all the world, today," he said as he greeted me. He hurried me to a waiting car. As we drove to the airport, he told me that he had already booked my flight to Paris and Guinea. He had found that the Guinea flight was supposed to leave before the Rome to Paris flight arrived, so he telexed the airline, asking that the plane be held for me. I don't even remember which airline I took to Paris. I was so rushed, I bounded onto the plane, feeling death at my heels. How the Czech ambassador had known I was in danger, I never knew. I had hardly thanked him, and then we were airborne. When we landed at Orly, I was notified to go at once to the departure gate for Guinea. The plane was already there, passengers inside, waiting for some time. "You must leave at once," the official said, and put me in a small car that hustled me out to the plane. The cabin door was reopened. Everyone seemed to know what was happening to me. I hurried up the ladder and seconds later we were in the air. When I arrived at Conakry, there was again a swarm of journalists waiting for me. They knew what had happened in Rome, and that I had left precipitately. They did not know whether I had been abducted, and whether I was still alive, or if I had fled. Since Conakry was where my home and family were, they had been frantically trying to get information there. Back in Paris, the airport officials were smoothly denying that anything special had happened. "No, we took only the normal measures that one takes for a passenger." Thanks to the Guinea plane connection, there had been no time between my rushing through the formalities and the moment of my flying for intercession by an outside party. There was no time for my papers to be checked out. The affair had been beautifully orchestrated by the Czech ambassador. My daughter Rita, who was then 20 and had taken the name of Christiane, was working for the Conakry radio station. She showed me a huge stack of telexes that the station had received. "Look at them. From all over the world," she exclaimed. Everyone was marveling. "You escaped. My God, after doing what you did, you escaped with your life." It was so good to be with my family again. I could hardly believe that I had been gone for only 3 months. It seemed like much longer as I looked back at all that had happened during those brimming days. Soon after the revelation of the protocol, Ganshof van der Meersch was obliged to ask Lumumba, for appearance's sake, to form a government. C.O.W.S, in a show of magnanimity, did not contest but asked, himself, to be relieved of the task. But even this apparent victory was to prove another treachery, and Lumumba knew it. The day of the Congo's independence, June 30th, arrived. I was in my home in Conakry as I listened to the ceremonies. Baudouin, King of Belgium, spoke first. I listened with bitter irony as he enumerated all the splendid things Belgium had done in the Congo. He spoke of the pioneers of African emancipation as if the Congo's independence had been Belgium's very own idea, all along. Frozen by a premonition of disaster, I listened, my heart beating, eyes closed. Then, like a miracle, came the Prime Minister's speech, restoring the dignity, so long mocked, of his people. Patrice Lumumba's speech began, "If the independence of the Congo is proclaimed today in agreement with Belgium, this friend with whom we deal as an equal, still no Congolese worthy of the name can ever forget that this independence was won only by struggle. Daily struggle, ardent and idealistic struggle, struggle in which we spared neither our strength nor our sacrifices, nor our suffering, nor our blood. It was a struggle born of tears, fire and blood. We are deeply proud of this noble and just struggle, for we had to put an end to our humiliation and slavery." His discourse closed, "In all these things, my brothers, we have suffered deeply. But we whom your representatives have elected to direct our dear country, we who have suffered the colonialists' oppression in body and soul, we say to you, all that is henceforth ended. The Republic of the Congo has been proclaimed and our beloved country is now in our hands, the hands of its own children. Together, my brothers, we are going to begin a new struggle, a sublime struggle, which will lead our country to peace, prosperity, and to greatness." What feelings stirred in me as I heard Patrice's words. Here, at last, in dignity, was the truth about what our people had suffered. A truth smothered for 80 years. The sad truth of a people for whom Patrice bore the wounds. But all truths are not good to tell, for that one cost him his life. Chapter 20. The Congo Catastrophe. The burden that Patrice Lumumba, Prime Minister of the Republic of the Congo, assumed was an awesome one. On his young, slim shoulders, he was then 34 years old, rested the heavy weight of a country of 6 provinces containing 14 million souls speaking 3 principal languages, Lingala, Swahili, and Kikongo, and an uncounted number of dialects. He inherited a scene set for disaster. Government officials and business people were resigning. People in the professions were leaving en masse. The Belgians had not trained replacements. There were few people in any field who were capable of taking responsibility. The workforce was made up only of copying clerks, blue-collar workers, and laborers. The most basic services began to go to pieces. As the Belgians had hoped. In Leopoldville, on the eve of independence, out of a population of 350,000, there were at least 100,000 unemployed. This number was to swell miraculously at the proclamation of independence, and the people demanded work and a good salary at once. How was the new government to wave a magic wand and, within 2 days after the proclamation, find a solution for the catastrophe that the Belgians had been preparing for 80 years? Before June 30th, the Congo was already mortally wounded. First there had been the divisive personal and political rivalries, then the tribal conflicts, and then the demonstrations of the unemployed. Finally, on July 5th, it was the army's turn to add to the country's calamities. The Congolese soldiers refused to obey any longer the commands of their Belgian officers. They mutinied. The chief source of their fury was the rule that the highest rank that a Congolese could hold in the army at that time, after 15 years of service, was sergeant or first sergeant. A few months earlier, at the Belgians' round table, Patrice Lumumba had raised the serious problem of the Africanization of the army's upper echelons. A Belgian, General Janssens, in particular, was detested by his Congolese troops. Scornfully he had announced that he had thrown out independence. That, he said, was for civilians. With a ferocity that accurately reflected what they'd learned from the Belgians, the army went into revolt. Congolese blood was spilled as the men turned against their officers. The Belgians' reprisals greatly resembled techniques of the Nazis, by whom they had been trained. Patrice Lumumba tried to halt the riots, making personal appeals to each side for calm and reason. The ship of state was listing dangerously as bad news continued to pile up everywhere. On July 4th I was in Conakry, when I received the Prime Minister's telegram asking me to return to the Congo. On July 8th I was back in Leo with my friends. At the airport, the Belgian police were still on duty. When I arrived, the man who examined my passport said to me in an aggressive tone, "You've been expelled from the Congo. You can't come back." Georges Greenfell, a minister of state and member of Lumumba's NCM, was beside me. He had been sent to Ghana to take part in the festivities there for the proclamation of the Republic. We sat together on the plane after he boarded at Accra, and now he interceded for me. "Are you still trying to make the law here? Where do you think you are, in Belgium? This is the independent Republic of the Congo. Independent, you understand? Yes, this woman was expelled, but the new government of the Congo has brought her back. Does that displease you? Hand me the phone." The Belgian police officer hesitated, marking time. "Whom do you wish to phone?" "The Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba." "And your name?" "State Minister Greenfell." The police officer was perplexed. "Has no one come to meet you?" Perhaps they did. But the plane was 8 hours late. "You?" "No." He let us pass. We took the aviation company's car and arrived at Leo just at curfew. Lumumba received me with open arms and these words: "You're 8 days late. Have you heard the news? That the army revolted?" "Yes, I heard it in Dakar. From Madiba, Keita." "Tell me. What happened?" It was General Janssens' statement that lit the powder keg. The men just couldn't bear it any longer. They had been working for starvation wages as it was. The idea that they would continue to be commanded by the Belgian officers was simply intolerable. And at this time, the men had been taught to shoot. Even their own brothers. And they had arms and ammunition. So they took their revenge wherever they could find it. on the Congolese population as well as on the Europeans. The revolt spread through the city blindly, like a disease. It has been terrible. And now? How are things now? As of today, they are a little better. I spent the day talking to the soldiers, with C.O.W.S. We managed to calm them. Camp Leopold has been quiet ever since. Patrice seemed exhausted. Still, he had the courage to laugh as he spoke to me, that laugh that was the trademark of his hope and idealism. In spite of everything, he laughed, to defy fate. And you? He asked me. What news have you? In Guinea I saw President Sékou Touré and Nkrumah. I asked them to give us technical help. The news of the revolt was frightening, but the Belgian press made it even worse than it was, aggravating the situation so as to justify the Belgians sending parachutists to establish order. The first act of these Belgian troops was to disarm the Congolese soldiers. This happened on the very evening that Moise Tshombe announced the secession of Katanga. It was a reconquest, pure and simple. In Leopoldville the Belgian paras, in combat clothes, took control everywhere. Machine guns were stationed at the crossroads. Radio-controlled jeeps blocked the major boulevards. Njili Airport was surrounded by the paras to assure the evacuation of the Europeans who, baggage in hand, were fleeing for Belgium. There was a fantastic traffic on the beach too, where boats were rented by whites fleeing to Brazzaville, to Yolu's great profit. The panic in this exodus was terrible to behold. Hundreds of cars were abandoned in the streets, giving a terribly sad appearance to this city, which was armed like a fortress. If the Congolese mistreated the Belgians, it was often to try to keep them from leaving the Congo. They did not want the whites to go. Throughout the country there was the revolting spectacle of violence and woes of every kind. Hate breeds hate. The word macaque, a species of monkey, was used as an epithet for blacks by the Europeans, even by the children. And the Congolese thought that the word Falamand, a corruption of Flamand, said with terrible scorn was the supreme insult. At Njili Airport there were incidents between the blacks who worked there and the Europeans who were fleeing. Several Congolese were killed. General Jansen declared, "This will teach a lesson to those who were lucky enough to escape our bullets. If they don't shut up we are ready to begin the sport again." The Assembly of Deputies tried to find a means of regaining control of the country, but found itself paralyzed. With the secession of Katanga, the Belgians' plan for keeping control of their economic interests in the Congo moved ahead with diabolic success. The idea of Katanga as a separate republic was really like a vulgar caricature of a mini-state in an operetta. The Belgians were quite serious about it, however, as they saw in the secession a means of escaping the nationalization of Katanga's rich mines. It would also, the Belgians believed, draw other provinces with tribal aspirations into secession after it. Thus Belgium would officially let go of the Congo, whose enormous needs and continued indebtedness, aggravated by the flight of capital and the repatriation of the gold and credit reserves, had put it in the red for a long time. But it would keep the prize, Katanga, and through its secession hope also to gain later the other two useful provinces of Kasai and Kivu. I cannot speak of Katanga without mentioning its extraordinary reservoir of minerals, as yet hardly touched: gold, cobalt, chrome, platinum, pewter, industrial diamonds, diamonds for jewelry, manganese, nickel, rare metal, uranium, asbestos, lead, tungsten, and germanium. Above all, Katanga produced copper, about 350,000 tons a year, from a vein 300 kilometers wide of the purest copper ever found. The Congo was only in the 15th day of its sovereignty when the president, C.O.W.S, and the prime minister, Lumumba, decided to make a tour through the country to calm the people and find a solution to the many problems that had hit the young nation so hard. Tirelessly, Lumumba mounted the platform, speaking to the people. Often he used a demagogic language. It was the lesser of the evils. This was a race against the clock. He had to avert the ruin into which the country was plunging. When the presidential plane returned to Njili Airport, near Leopoldville, at the end of the tour, the Belgian ambassador refused to give Lumumba and the chief of state the honors of arrival on the pretext that he wanted to avoid any provocation of disorder among the Belgian refugees who were waiting at the airport to leave. There was, in fact, a scandalous scene. One of the Belgians pulled the prime minister's beard and slapped him. President of monkeys, the European women screamed at the top of their voices. We will come back. Bastard. Murderer. Son of a bitch. Others spit in his face. Lumumba remained dignified. He always was and always would be dignified. When I heard of this disgraceful event, I asked myself who the savages in this case were. Were they in the skins of the blacks, or the whites? That evening Lumumba called Antoine Gazenga and asked him to bring me to his house. The Prime Minister did not in any way show that he was affected by the scene that had taken place at the airport. Lithe and elegant, he almost glided when he walked. Some friends were visiting him, so we were about a dozen in all. But this time, in contrast to our other more intense political consultations, the atmosphere exuded a family-like peace and intimacy. Friendship lit his own open, loyal face. He said to me, "You see our poor Congo, Madame Blouin. There is so much work to do." He spoke without passion, a rare thing for him, of the tour for peace that he had made through the Congo. He denounced the cruelties that the Congolese people had inflicted on the Europeans and repeated his desire to have them remain. He wanted the parachutists to leave so that life could become normal again. Above all, he wanted to avoid a break in diplomatic relations with Belgium. For a long time he talked without interruption. He himself served us martinis, talking constantly. He told us of other affronts he had received on the tour. You know, when we were on our way to Loyaubourg, the Belgian pilot turned the plane around and came back to Leopoldville, without even telling us. Pretended that he hadn't enough gasoline. When I asked why, since we had filled up at Stanleyville, the pilot answered, "It's a military secret." And in Katanga they refused to let us land. That is inadmissible. Inadmissible. Patrice was calm, relaxed, but I felt that something was about to happen, something important. But we will have them yet. With this. Triumphantly, majestically, he took a copy of a telegram from the pocket of his white shirt. It was typewritten and bore two signatures, his own and that of the president, C.O.W.S. "It's from Moscow," he said. "If people want to say that because of it I am a communist, then the president is too." He laughed gaily. And we sent the same telegram to the United States. "We are simply asking that Belgium not be permitted to take away with one hand what they gave with the other." Waving the telegram he pronounced, "This will get results. Even C.O.W.S now sees what the Belgians are capable of, and he is with me in this. Tomorrow I will address the nation on the radio and tell them what we are doing." I had been accused of being behind certain of the Prime Minister's acts, and there were even journalists who referred to the work of the team Lumumba. Ever since I humiliated the Belgian government with the press conference in Rome, I had been tagged with many labels. The media referred to me as a Red, the Black Pasionaria, the secret counselor of Lumumba and Gazenga, the Prime Minister's Eminence Grice, and the courtesan of all the African chiefs of state. This never troubled me. After all, it's quite fair for an adversary to sling mud at you. Some people thought that these two telegrams, which were to make so much ink flow in the world press, were the work of Madame Blouin. I can swear that this is false. On the other hand, I do not deny being the one behind an earlier appeal to the U.S. government. The Prime Minister knew that the United States was supporting Belgium's underhanded maneuvers in the Congo. But we decided to act as if we did not know, in order to bring into the open what the position of the United States was. On my suggestion, Lumumba wired the U.S. government for cooperation in asking the Belgian government to remove its troops from Congolese soil. He knew the request would be refused. But making it would give him elbow room for maneuvering, and it would also make clear, at last, the U.S. government's intentions with regard to the Congo. The U.S. ambassador's answer did not even take a normal, diplomatic form. It was given the status of not having been received. It was then that Lumumba asked the United Nations for help. Chapter 21. Betrayal everywhere. Soon after July 14, when Patrice Lumumba asked the United Nations to assist in stabilizing his new state, the casques bleus, or blue helmets, as they were known, arrived. 20,000 of them. The United Nations also sent technicians. Dressed like businessmen, they behaved more like conquerors in search of fortunes than professionals charged with rebuilding a country. There were swarms of Haitians among them. Because they were black and spoke French, they were assimilated into the scene with an ease that alarmed those of us who knew what they represented. The white technician was easy to identify as he set about his work. The Ethiopian was a little less conspicuous. He was an African, nearly black. The Hindus were clearly what they were. But the Haitians caught the Congolese off guard. They seemed like blacks who had come back to their homeland. They acted so brotherly, and they were everywhere, on the streets and boulevards, in the bars and at the dances in the Site Congolese, wearing their loud, multicolored, made in Miami shirts. Their black skins were a passport to go anywhere with an innocent look. The Congolese people were quite touched that these Haitian brothers had spontaneously answered their country's call. Little did the Congolese know that they came from Papa Doc by way of New York, and what that meant. It all went with a well-known song, Independence, Cha-Cha-Cha. The Secretary-General of the United Nations, Dag Hammarskjöld, arrived in the Congo. That same evening, the seceded Katanga issued its own money, made in Switzerland, neutral Switzerland. The Prime Minister was not in Leopoldville. He had gone to New York to speak at the United Nations and subsequently was visiting several European capitals. In his absence it was Gizenga, the Vice Prime Minister, who received the Secretary-General. Gizenga made an important speech in which he denounced the Secretary-General's policy of laissez-faire with regard to the secession of Katanga. The following day the sensationalist press attacked me, as usual, saying that it was I who had written the speech and instigated the Vice Prime Minister's provocative attitude. The press also claimed that I had quarreled with Hammarskjöld in a nightclub. The fact was, I did an enormous amount of writing, for Gizenga, and for the radio, to offset an insidious campaign that described itself as anti-communist but that in fact was designed to subvert Lumumba's regime. It was called moral rearmament. I therefore initiated a series of broadcasts called The African Moral Rearmament to teach the Congolese people the need for unity in this hour of crisis. Besides my work for Gizenga and my radio editorials, I had a new post. On the day of his departure to New York to speak to the United Nations Assembly, Lumumba had named me his chief of protocol. At the same time that Lumumba wired me in Conakry to return to Leopoldville, he named my husband as director of mines for the Congo. I was free to leave at once, but for André it took longer as he had to give notice to the state of Guinea. About a month later he arrived at Leo with my mother and the children. When he saw the calumnies with which my name was smeared in the newspapers, he was enraged. This was at the height of the political ferocities and my enemies would say anything to discredit me. I came home from work at noon one day and found André beside himself with fury. We had some strong exchanges and then André went to Lumumba to complain. "Have you seen the papers?" he demanded. "They're just rags," Lumumba dismissed them. "Do you expect me to accept this? To let my wife be treated like this?" "I know," Lumumba agreed sympathetically. "Our enemies attack her all the time. Not for what she's done, but simply because she's a woman, and she's there, in the thick of it. Believe me," Lumumba went on, "she has nothing to gain in this whole affair. She's nearly ill from working so hard, from serving with such devotion. If I knew it would be like this I certainly would not have agreed to come." André raved. "But, Monsieur Blouin," Lumumba said calmly, "I'm astonished at your reaction. If Madame Blouin is persecuted by the imperialists, it's because she's doing good work. And don't they do the same to me? Have you seen what they write about me? That's not my problem. It's my wife they're dragging in the mud. And I won't have it. In that case, Monsieur Blouin, you will be putting brakes on our work. You will be damaging our cause." Before we left, Lumumba put his hands on my shoulders and said, "Courage, my sister." My husband got over his initial reaction, although he remained edgy about my giving so much of myself to my work. My little mother, Josephine, took care of Sylvian, who was still too young for school, and our family life became as normal as it could among the growing disasters around us. I had not asked for the position of chief of protocol, but I was glad of the chance to be in the heart of the activity, receiving advance telegrams from all over the world and meeting important people. Lumumba absolutely wanted me to be with them, and as I was now skillful in the mechanics of arranging events, something I had learned to do as mistress in my own house and hostess to large gatherings, this seemed appropriate for me. An official car took me to work each day, depositing the children, Christian and Patrick, at their schools, on the way. The first thing I had to do at my desk each morning was look over Lumumba's appointments for the day and check the names of important people arriving at the airport. I was supposed to send cars to meet those people, but often I was unable to locate a car. Depriving me of transportation was one way in which my enemies sabotaged my work. The VIP, exasperated by a long and fruitless wait, would be obliged to take a taxi, to my chagrin. This petty humiliation to my office transpired many times. To reach the office of the Prime Minister I had to go around a hedge 10 meters long that bordered a wooden fence. One morning I had some folders to take to his office. Nearly every day Lumumba held a press conference to which he invited foreign diplomats and the international press. This day, on my path, I met the Soviet ambassador, Mr. Yakovlev. We shook hands and he asked if the conference would be held soon. As we shook hands goodbye, after this very ordinary encounter, a flash bulb blinded us. "Why did you take that picture?" I snapped at the photographer, although I could easily guess who put him up to it. "Because you are so beautiful and elegant, madam," answered this hilarious imbecile. The photo was to be used as evidence that I was dressed by the great couturiers. While it is true that I have always made an effort to appear dainty and fresh, it is not true that I was then dressed in high fashion. There was a time when I had worn couturier clothes, but while working in the Congo certainly was not one of them. I was in fact living in a simplicity that approached poverty. The Belgians had deliberately emptied the state's coffers before leaving. There were no funds, at the time that Lumumba's government took over, with which to pay its employees. A few of the ministers managed to scrape together some funds for their salaries, but aside from one advance of 20,000 francs, I received nothing for my work as chief of protocol. My husband, as director of mines, was not paid 1 centime. I could not bear to add to Lumumba's difficulties by complaining about our financial plight, so instead I asked Roger for help, which he sent, and Charles Groitz, who also gave me money at that hard time. The next day the picture was on the front page of the capital's newspapers, asserting that this was proof that I had been bought out by Mr. Gromyko, the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Soviet Union. Little did they know how the Soviets, too, detested me for my independent ways, and for my cynicism about their particular brand of imperialism. I had seen their ambitions in Guinea and knew very well what they wanted in Africa. The Prime Minister's phones rang 24 hours a day with urgent requests for appointments. Patrice had the annoying habit of trying to see everyone who asked for him. This greatly handicapped my work. It made me indignant to see people streaming through his office as if it were a train station, and I made an effort to staunch the flow of traffic. The situation was quite the opposite, on the other hand, with the president, C.O.W.S. He passed his days peacefully, in an ivory tower, surrounded by Belgian advisers who sent everyone with complaints to the office of the Prime Minister. Doubtless this was a deliberate tactic to hamper Lumumba's efficiency, for his good-hearted efforts to be available to the people were well known. The one time that I was able to function in a really creditable fashion was for the arrival of Dag Hammarskjöld. We gave a splendid reception for him. The press, in fact, said that it seemed designed to put the Belgians to shame. But that was just their vulgar way of looking at it. The music, the flowers, and the food were all excellent, and it was a truly beautiful dinner. I was not always at Patrice's side, as some people expected me to be. In fact, I saw him only when he had specific instructions to give me on my work. This reserve disconcerted some of my enemies who presumed I was an adventurer and courtesan. One day I met Patrice in the yard between our two buildings. He took my hand and said, "I am touched by your reticence, Andrée. I know you are under attack. We all are. But be patient. Those who are against us will tire before we do." He gave me his wonderful smile. "Don't hesitate to come and see me if you have problems." Problems. They were daily. Telegrams announcing the arrival of visiting dignitaries were hidden in order to sabotage my protocol work. Folders of documents disappeared from my office. Strange mix-ups occurred that cast suspicion on me. It was a war of nerves. For Patrice it was even worse. Each day new traps were set for him. Hands were closing around his throat. Still he kept his courage and optimism. He continued to work for the Congo of his dreams. Sometimes goodness and simplicity are misinterpreted during the lifetime of a genius and are recognized only after his death. I think Patrice was such a genius. Perhaps he was not meant to go the whole way, in his work, but only to be the apostle who opens the path. His goodness will ruin us, Gizenga repeated to me every day. It's not just goodness, to tell the truth, it's naivete. He's too easy. Mournfully, I had to agree. And then there was the matter of Patrice's soft policies. Every time the Council of Ministers takes a position on reform, Gizenga said, Patrice refuses to put it into effect because he's afraid of angering the people. He says they will sabotage the economy. He's trying to please everyone. With his methods we are heading for disaster. Gizenga was right. This man of iron was a loyal friend, but he also saw the situation as it was. His silence was his strong card. He listened and he watched. But he was tenacious, he never forgot his ultimate purpose. After his visit to the United Nations, Lumumba made a round of visits to friendly countries. I considered this a serious tactical error at a time of so much chaos at home. Worse yet, he took with him several politically unreliable people. Poor Patrice. It is true that those who are of the best faith are often the most cruelly deceived. When he returned he was engulfed by people clamoring to see him. The office of the Prime Minister and his residence as well were a regular Tower of Babel with constant, noisy comings and goings of all kinds of visitors. One of our grave concerns at this time was the large number of airplanes of all nationalities bringing in swarms of people who sought to profit by the country's chaos. Leopoldville was a center of intense movement, with almost no immigration control. Opportunists from both Eastern and Western Europe rushed to the Congo. Bankers, business experts, diplomats and special envoys, trade union men, journalists, representatives of this and that, dubious spectators of every nationality, they all came to reap what they could from the crisis in the Congo. Crammed with theories, ambitions, and ready-made ideas, each of them had something to try out on the Congo guinea pig, this phenomenon of the age. In this feverish, impossible atmosphere it was Patrice Lumumba, only, whom everyone wanted to see. I found it almost impossible to control his visitors because of the press conference which he held almost every day. The people who attended were admitted to the garden of his residence, which was only 20 meters from his office. Although the conference was announced for 11 o'clock am, the Prime Minister did not actually address the press before 1 p.m., which gave the crowd 2 hours in which to move about freely, consuming the cakes and drinks that the Prime Minister had ordered served to them. Traitors were organizing everywhere, even in Lumumba's cabinet. In the Vice Prime Minister's office, dossiers disappeared from Gizenga's desk as well as from mine. I realized my desk was being systematically searched, every day. When I locked the drawers with a key, they were callously forced. I complained about this to the Prime Minister and asked for a thorough investigation. Lumumba replied, "Patience, my sister. Try to have patience. I know it's difficult. But our opponents will get tired. We will have the last word, you'll see." Exhausted, furious. I lowered my eyes to keep Patrice from seeing my profound frustration and distress at his naive reasoning. There was nothing I could do. I knew then that it was already too late. Too late for the Congo, too late for Africa, too late for the Prime Minister himself, and for his friends who believed in him. Too late to stop this infernal, grinding machine that had been set in motion by the Congo crisis, and that, one way or another, would mean tragedy for each of us. Since the United Nations General Secretary had not, with his casques blues, made any real effort to end the Katanga secession, Lumumba, sick at heart, sent in Congolese troops. These troops were close to victory when Hammarskjöld saw that their success would open his own lack of efforts to charges of complicity. He had to act, and swiftly. He asked C.O.W.S to stop immediately the advance of the Congolese troops. C.O.W.S obeyed. On September 5, President C.O.W.S discharged the Prime Minister, and asked Ilio, President of the Senate, to form a new cabinet. Sirens broke the heavy silence that weighed on Leopoldville. Lumumba made immediate reply. He, in turn, discharged C.O.W.S. The door opened on a gulf and the Congo plunged into the abyss. Alone, at night, like a mad woman, I raced to the home of the Prime Minister, on Boulevard Lippens. A dense crowd had already gathered there, ministers, members of the NCM, journalists, and the mere curious. The security guard had been given instructions to admit only members of the government. I did all I could to try to enter the residence, but the guards prevented me. This was, in fact, the first time that they respected orders to keep the dignity of the place. My heart aching, I sat in my car in front of the residence for a long time, waiting for the results. The very thing I had dreaded had come to pass. It broke like a thunderclap over the young republic, blasting its new life. Finally, unable to sit there longer, I decided to walk to the home of Pierre Mulliel, who was now Minister of Education, only a block away. I waited with his wife, Clementine, until 5 o'clock in the morning. Pierre arrived, exhausted from the grueling night without sleep. I tried to come to you, I assured him. I wanted to be there, to help, if I could. Yes, they told me that you were at the front gate. I asked that you be permitted to enter. Bamboko refused on the excuse that you were neither a minister nor a deputy. As chief of protocol, it would have been normal for you to be there, but it was not the moment to argue over hopeless issues. Tell me, I begged passionately, what happened? The government unanimously rejected Lumumba's discharge. According to law, the Prime Minister cannot be dismissed without the signature of 2 ministers, Mulliel said. Then who are the 2 ministers on C.O.W.S.'s side? I asked. No one. Not one member of the government is against Lumumba, answered Mulliel. Are you sure? I was stupefied that Pierre would say such a thing. He was so well informed, and sound, usually. Yes, we are united. These words stabbed me. I was sure he was wrong. 2 names immediately came to mind, Delvaux and Bamboko. They were quite capable of it. It was they who had called in the Belgian paratroopers. On several occasions the Prime Minister had wanted to dismiss them, but always too generous. He had changed his mind, believing that they would mend their ways. In the assembly it was Bamboko who referred to me as the evil genius of the government. We are opposed to this woman's presence, he said. Opposed to all her provocative acts. Constantly the word was whispered around, the trouble is Madame Blouin. Lumumba had repudiated these accusations in the National Assembly, this place for settling personal griefs. Ardently, he had defended me. Later we learned that it was indeed Bamboko and Delvaux who had signed the order for the dismissal of Lumumba by C.O.W.S. But their treachery did not succeed. Both houses rejected the dismissal and the Prime Minister appeared at a session of the National Assembly and refuted his detractors' charges, one after the other. Wildly acclaimed by his partisans, he was carried out in triumph. I was still in my office when he entered the great court of his residence. I hurried to him with his wife Pauline, who threw herself into his arms. I shook his hand and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Prime Minister. We are proud of you." Patrice put his hands on my shoulders and kissed both my cheeks. I was never to see him again.
Already know things do not end well for Patrice Lumumba. Katherine, Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. That was the conclusion of Chapter 21. We'll resume the very beginning of Chapter 22, Lumumba's Downfall and Ruin. 267. Look at that. This isn't the first paragraph. This is not the first paragraph, but it is on the first page where we're going to begin. I learned later, including, this is Blouin talking about Joseph Mobutu, who we'll learn more about, who was president of the Congo, prime minister, when the Rumble in the Jungle, George Foreman fight happened in 1973. He's president and welcoming both black fighters to, at that time, Zaire, before they switched the name back, but welcoming the fighters and all of that. Blouin says about Joseph Mobutu his earlier activities, I learned later, meaning she didn't know all this information at the time, had included being a spy for both the Belgian intelligence and the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. CIA, man. Been talking about the Central Intelligence Agency all year long. And in some of the same areas even. Woof. Global system of white supremacy racism. Anyway, that goes back to Nazi Germany, right? That's what Michael Mayer's book, even when he was talking about the origins of the CIA. Any hoodles, Katherine Massey Book Club, the number 2 dial, 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound, press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound, press star 61 if you would like to participate. We should be all done with this book next week. I have to double check. We certainly have more to go this week, but just, man, we should be easily all done next week. Wrapping it up, moving on to a brand new book in 2 weeks. Matter of fact, we don't even have to make it a secret because I was pretty decided while I was still in California for many reasons, and then things have only intensified to say, oh yeah, we should keep the exact book that I picked while I was in California. The next book, and you know I love the autobiographies. Make sure I get the next book, and we get to double dip. We don't even do that very often for the book club. So we already read Dr. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, 2 times. The Heart of a Woman, Dr. Maya Angelou. So this is later in life. Autobiography. Now, why are we reading this book specifically? Even Double Ways, San Francisco, partly because San Francisco, that's where she relocates, Dr. Maya Angelou, and they have a flippin' statue that is gorgeous, but a flippin' statue out in front of the main San Francisco Library branch, and it's a statue of a book. And it's got a beautiful picture of Dr. Angelou on the cover of the book. But I mean, what? I didn't see that every day, but I saw it a lot going down. And it's in front of City Hall, or it's across the street from City Hall. So you can stand out and look at that. And then you could actually take a picture from the back of the statue, and you'd have the statue, and then you'd have City Hall in the background. I should have done it that way, where Moscone and Milk were assassinated. And then to the left was the Erykah Badu concert. Anyway, but that's the next book. Also, at the San Francisco Main Library, they had a big exhibit for Dr. Angelou and her books and speeches and all of that. Big connection to San Francisco, even though she wasn't born there, long-time resident, right on. I looked because they had a listing of her books, and she, extraordinary writer, literary giant. They did not have The Heart of a Woman on the list. I said, whoa, what's, and this was after I had seen, because I got to San Francisco after I'd seen Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat 3 times. It took 3 times for me seeing it to get the title right. I was like, what book is that? Because he quotes from that book as well. Man, I finally got that book right after I saw the film the 3rd time and got that book Lumumba is all over that book. Many people thought the assassination of Lumumba was really important. So old, coony, patriarchal, toxic, black male Gus will do back-to-back black female autobiographies where Lumumba's assassination is a central theme. And these both books were mentioned in Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. Very literate film, like so many receipts, quotes. But that's the next book. If anyone can locate the unabridged, now that's important because I found the unabridged audiobook of The Heart of a Woman, Dr. Angela. That would be great if it's her reading it. That would be great because we had her reading I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That would be awesome to hear her voice again. But if it's not her reading it, I guess we could take a listen. But I mean, if it's her reading, let's bend over backwards to get that with love. I mean, who could do it better than her? If we can't get her, then, whatever. But that should be the next book. Either way, The Heart of a Woman, Dr. Maya Angelou. Now, many readers have done a lot of research about the Congo since we've been reading this book. Kudos to them. They have read, white people have written so many books on the Congo and just specifically on the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. I think one of the newer books, The Lumumba Plot, I've had folks who are reading that one. Cobalt Red, I think is one of the other books that I mentioned not that long ago. Give the full title, Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives. That was on the book list for 2023. People reading that one, reading about the railroad. I mean, you could read, that could be a lifetime research project, really. Just the Congo and really global. So if you have an iPhone, you should at least, I'm at least read 4 or 5 books. I got an iPhone. I'm at least read a little bit about all the black people that suffered for me to get my iPhone 16. Just saying. A lot of listeners have chipped in and done some additional study to supplement their learning. Kudos to you. I have done that as well. I try to do that every time we read, just to, I'm facilitating the book, and I'm still learning so I can be a little bit more informed about, what it is that we're talking about. Man, when I went to the University of Washington Library, I was a little bit disappointed because I was like, man, I told you I was stunned that it was such a better location to research in California. But then I remembered, I did get a lot of Jonestown material even before I went there and all the rest. If I hadn't got all that material about Jonestown here before I went to California, I may not have been inspired to make the trip to begin with. So I go to UW to get, Vandermeersch, I think that's how you say his name. I went to he has a 700-page book on his views and time in the Congo. This white Belgian dude, 700 pages, got pictures, graphs, maps, charts, 700 pages. Could you imagine writing a 700-page, and it's only about like 2-3 year experience. 700, I was staggered. It's all in French, but they have so many apps now that you can just copy and paste and get a great, accurate translation. I did that to, just start going through and picking all that. I'm sure within a year or two, they'll have an app that can just translate the whole thing to English if they don't have that already. AI is amazing. Anyway, but I got that. And then just going, because there's so much material, like I said, I looked at the library and it was like a whole wall of just everything Congo. So this is just a little bit of some of the material that I found. Some of this is material that I got in while I was down in California. So I mentioned, we heard Larry Delvin, Chief of Station Congo, fighting the Cold War let me give the full title. They cheated us on the full title. I'll give it to you in a second. But Chief of Station Congo, that's the main title for Larry Delvin, former CIA white man. He writes on page 53, when Lumumba returned home, things got worse. Whatever rapport he and Dag Hammarskjöld, white man with the UN, had in New York faded away, and I think the two men never really understood each other. Lumumba seemed as angry with the United Nations as he was with the Belgians and with us. His hostility was reinforced by two members of his staff. Sergei Michael, his private secretary, was a French leftist. I wonder if this is a white man. With strong anti-Western views, the French had condemned him to death in absentia for his support of the Algerian rebels. I bet that's a white man. And a friendly foreign intelligence service had identified him as a Soviet agent. Madame Andrée Blouin, Lumumba's protocol chief, who had arrived from Guinea immediately after the independence ceremonies, was a striking, light-skinned beauty. She was anti-white. He didn't say that for old Sergei. That's more reason why I think this is a white person, because he said he had anti-Western views. But old Blouin, she's anti-white, and reportedly had considerable influence with Lumumba. In addition, he was surrounded by a group of radical anti-Western Ghanaians and Ghanaians. The Ghanaians were particularly vitriolic in their criticism of Westerners while speaking favorably of Soviet and other Eastern Bloc diplomats. Let's see. So much. Okay, so I'll switch to a different one. Let's see. Different report. This is one of the ones from California. French and Congo Belgian news. So this is just a mass of reports. The Courrier d'Afrique. This is June 18th through the 17th, 1962. The whole report is about Andrée Blouin, and it's titled "The Pompadour of the Congo." Pompadour is another hair reference. We talked about her hiding things in her hair last week. Skipping down a little bit, Miss Andrée Gerbolet, before her marriage, born in Bangui, capital of the Ubangi, was the daughter of a well-known European elephant hunter and a black woman of the Bandari tribe. Intelligent, ambitious, but above all beautiful, the future secretary of Ginzinga was sent to Brazzaville, capital of the former French Equatorial Africa, to the private boarding school of the Sisters of St. Joseph de Cluny. She was not at all an exemplary student and broke the strict rules of the Catholic institution. At 17, she was expelled. That's not what she said. The pretty mulatto was not at all discouraged. She knew she was well endowed intellectually and physically attractive. She crossed the Congo River and arrived in Leopoldville, where with a certain success, she used her attributes to seduce until the colonial authorities were forced to expel her. I'll stop there. The Pompadour of the Congo. This is a French newspaper. Let's see. Oh, wow. Wait a minute. Let me give one more. This is all one massive, like 200-page report with a lot of different clippings from an array of different sources of the time. So this is a report from Conakry, Guinea. I'm skipping down to about the second page. One woman who knew her at the time said neither she nor her friends could point to any specific instance of misconduct on the part of Miss Blouin, though they all suspected her of being a joyful partner in several clandestine episodes. What? There was something about her that made the average woman take a firmer grip on her husband's arm. Men, she added, were usually flattered by the least sign of attention from her. She moved about like a lynx, and she exuded sex. When Guinea was granted independence, Madame Blouin suddenly appeared as sort of an unofficial hostess for the president Sékou Touré. She was at her best when entertaining the many distinguished visitors that came to Conakry. She was an excellent conversationist and had an intelligent knowledge of a variety of subjects that would interest men. In addition, she was a good dancer and had an easy, familiar manner that made a man not only feel at ease in her presence, but she was making an impression upon her. Her whole manner seemed designed to flatter the masculine ego. Friends of Touré insist that there was no romantic relationship between the handsome young leader and his hostess, though rumors hinted there was something more. And it goes on talking about her. I mean, it is staggering, the volume of reports about the Congo at this time in general, and then the times that she specifically pops. I mean, they got pictures, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And so much so that you can look for patterns in the way that she's talked about. So I'll give one more and we'll stop there. Although, man, I could pile them up for days. U.S. News and World Report. This is from August 29, 1960, so about right in the period that we were hearing about today. This is Congo heading for a blow-up. It's got the white UN troops pictured with guns, and then they've got a group of Congolese demonstrating. They look like they do not have guns, they have bicycles. Anyway, I'm skipping down, so the article has lots, and then it has a specific portion, red tinge in black Africa. Are the communists calling signals for the Congo's premier Patrice Lumumba? To many diplomats here, the circumstantial evidence more and more points in that direction. For example, the premier's press officer is Sergei Michael, a Frenchman identified with left-wing causes. Before showing up in the Congo, he was active in the Algerian rebellion against France. Newsmen have noticed that sometimes the interpretations he puts on Mr. Lumumba's remarks goes far beyond what the premier actually said. Vice Premier Antoine Gazinga long has been listed by the Belgian police as a known communist of feminine touch. In addition, there's the 38-year-old half-caste mystery woman, Andrée Blouin. Officially, she is the Congo government's protocol officer. Unofficially, she's a lot more than that. She denies that she is a communist, but most Western diplomats here regard her as the Congo's strongest link with the communist world. Madame Blouin is not a citizen of the Congo. She carries a passport from the Guinea Republic, often described as communism's first bastion in Black Africa. She has been in the Congo before. She was expelled for subversive activities by the Belgian colonial government in the days before independence. After independence, Madame Blouin wasted no time coming back to the Congo. She arrived in the first week and has been here ever since. One of her jobs is supervising the content of the Congo government's radio broadcasts. Her job as chief of protocol gives her close control over who among foreign diplomats has access to officials of the Congo government. Her most quoted remark here is, "The West tries to achieve its aims by ruse and corruption, master deceivers," if she is talking about racist man and racist woman. Madame Blouin is not in the best of health. She has a heart condition. She has a slight attack, a recurrence the other day. First at her side was Joseph Virius, the consul general from communist Czechoslovakia, who has been hard at work in the Congo for 5 years. And they have a photograph, pretty good, high quality, not iPhone level, but pretty quality image of her. Guess you can judge for yourself if you think she's tall. Just one thing I cannot stress enough. This is white journalists, probably mostly white men, might even be all white men, talking about Andrée Blouin. You hear how they all talk about half-caste, striking beauty. They talk about her like she's a total whore, and sometimes that's exactly what they're saying. They just pretty it up with the language and such, but if anybody is going to be talked about as, you're a sexist and you're patriarchal and all of that, I would say it is the way that white people talk about her. I haven't really heard her talking about Lumumba was just drooling, and every time we got together, and, when we going to hook up, and what's wrong with you, gal, and hey, come up to my room. I haven't heard any of that. They've been about business, dealing with these racists. They got pictures of her talking to males. None of them look like, hey, I'm going to holler at her. Let's go back in, get a beer. And None of that. They look like they're trying to solve problems. It's these white people, and they, beginning of every, the mysterious, lovely, half-cased, beautiful, like, come on, man. Then turn out, y'all sexist. That's right, these old sexist black dudes on the continent and the sexist African-American males. You don't want old Kamala Harris. See, that's what's right. Like, nah, man. Nah, this is y'all. And it just goes on, and especially good. Go look at some of the white new in around the world. You want one more? You want one more? Let's go around the world. Let's go around the world with it. So you can't just say, Gus T just reading old U.S. reports and shit. Let's get one more. Let's get one more. Global press. So there we go. One more. French press. Translated. This is the top of the article. They got a picture and got her child with her. This beautiful mixed race. See, they emphasize that too. She's not just a Negro. She's got a white parent. That's a part of the mystery. And the fact that she has less melanin as well. She's so beautiful. She's not even dark like these other African Negras. Continue. The beautiful mixed race who bathes her baby is Andrée Blouin. Even that, why is she being sexualized while she's bathing her child? That's how you start the report too? Come on. This beautiful mixed race who bathes her baby is Andrée Blouin, the one which was called the Black Pasionaria, and whose sensational memoir debuts today on page 20. And it goes on from there and gives, the rest of the point. You can read. I got this one while I was in California. But it's just like, come on, man. Like, it's y'all that sit around and start and emphasize her physical her white or closeness to white people because she has a white parent, half-caste and all the rest. Métis, that's what that means. Mixed race and all that. That's a white parent. And then, beautiful and mysterious. It's y'all, man, in the press every time and around the world. But I'm a patriarchal black dude too, me and Patrice. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. One thing I did want to include, grab folks who dialed in. Man, I went through and started grabbing Newsweeks. I don't want to hear nothing about white people who are ignorant about racism. Twofold. One, I just told you they got a mountain of books, bigger than a person, bigger than two people, two big people, two like football player people, bigger than that. Who's reading all them books? They don't even have niggers at UW. Matter of fact, get it both ways. They don't have Congolese niggers. They don't have homegrown U.S. niggers at the University of Washington. So who is reading all these books about chopping off hands and Patrice Lumumba's teeth in a jar? Use your suspects. That's one. Two, they talked about all of this in Newsweek like all the time. Every issue for about a good 3-4 years. I don't know how many of you all read Newsweek now because it still exists, but I guarantee 60 years ago, your grandmothers, great-grandmothers, aunties, and uncles, or if you're older, parents, whatever, if you were alive then, Fuller, I suspect it was not mostly black people or not very many black people at that time, had a subscription to Newsweek or keeping up with what's happening in the Congo via Newsweek on a weekly basis. Please. So who was all that for? Use your suspects. Probably the grandparents and uncles of the folks at UW, Berkeley, Stanford. Oh my God! Can I get? Man, they got that fella who shot the insurance CEO. They made the arrest and said, "Whoa, this fella got connections to Stanford and the Bay Area." They published in the Stanford Chronicle and the Stanford Daily newspaper, said they think he was here recently. Maybe the same time that Gus T was there, just a few days back. Man, the book we are reading has a co-author Jean Scott McKellar, white woman. Do you know she has Stanford connections too? I nearly passed out. Is she a CIA agent? Maybe they go there to get trained in all sorts of stealth. You know, what they call be incognito, clandestine activities. But that nearly, man, retarded. If I had not, I would have had to spend a little bit more. Does she have a section here? What did she do while she was here to get trained to go and help Miss Blouin put her book together about all this CIA activity and the assassination of Lumumba? Stanford run the world. All the CIA activities, again, that's what Dr. William Shockley was talking about while debating Dr. Wellesley. That's where Stanford popped up and was Jonestown, a CIA medical activity, and saying, why do we need Silicon Valley? Oh, to control the niggers. Yes, yes. 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let's see. A victim in New Jersey. Commentary to share. Should be with us. Proceed.
Hey, Gus, I just want to say welcome back. I'm in my office, so let me just get to a room that's less noisy. Office being the gym, help as well. Anything that I say, listeners, Gus, correct me, because oftentimes I listen to the playback, and sometimes your brain is moving faster than your tongue, so you can, you know what you want to say, but you might say it not articulate it correctly. It's easy to see. I was listening, and if I'm not mistaken, Miss Blouin was in her later years became I would say akin to depressed. Like she wasn't a happy woman towards the end. I remember that being stated, maybe not that way in the earlier read. After seeing what she went through, her toil, her navigating being in a tragic arrangement, but also practicing Black self-respect in her endeavors of trying to do her part on the planet by ending colonialism. And also last week when she made a statement that's often stated by many Black people, we are our worst enemy, not the CIA, not all these linked global intelligence agencies with vast amounts of resources through military, communications, media, finances. No, a poor Black villager with little education and little knowledge of how the system works, and they're able to be manipulated and propagandized against their own self-interest. They are the biggest problem. Nothing has changed. You can make every correlation or every comparison to what we're seeing today. We've seen in the Middle East, we've seen the Arab Spring. From eyesight, as we look in the Congo and what's still going on in the Congo, we see all these organizations fighting. Not organizations, but these different groups fighting each other. And from our side, we like, wow, these people can't, they can't get it together. the Africans can't get it together. But when you look closely, the hand of the white Europeans are in this. Same thing with the Arab Spring. We thought that, the Arabs, man, they getting together, they overthrowing these corrupt regimes. And fast forward, we got Gaddafi killed, mutilated, if I'm not mistaken, even sodomized. We got, Assad toppled. We have all these propaganda pieces about these powerful dictators, and white people within weeks, months, topple their whole government. And like Patrice Lumumba, who, because I did some, reading is better than watching TV, but I did look at some documentaries, and with his knowledge, he was threatening what they would call the West with aligning himself with the Soviets. And we see how that ended up for Lumumba. We see how that ended up for Cuba. And we also see how that just ended up for Assad in Syria. The arrogance of the great nephew of King Leopold, and how he stood on what should have been a day of independence, and he downplayed, acronym MOO. That was MOO at its greatest. Just obfuscate, minimize, omit in front of hundreds, I want to say, Congolese people. And that one defiant Negro stood up and corrected the history. And for him correcting, he was killed. It said that Patrice Lumumba had white friends. They wasn't that powerful. They couldn't stop him from being murdered. And from my experience on this earth, if you want to challenge a white friend, start talking about some black justice or correcting racism, white supremacy, or have some black self-respect and call out racism when you see it and see how strong your friendship is. Sexualizing this woman, you're right. I haven't heard anything in the text where any of the African men were sexualizing her. They were serious. They had a goal, and it wasn't laying down, and it wasn't having sex. And often, even when it's black people in America, black males during the civil rights movement was accused of the only reason why, we was protesting and we wanted rights, more access to white women, so Martin Luther King and, got murdered because he just wanted to sleep around with white women. So, again, great for pointing that out, Gus, because that some way, somehow, the propagandists would kind of, try to slip how, sexual deviants these Africans are. Back to the piece where they were very serious about solving the problem, but confusion. We see that they rule through confusion. When Lumumba took over this government, he had to pay the military. I'm not sure if they had a police department. They had to be paid, and then in great propaganda fashion, you post pictures of Blouin, looking fabulous as she's dressed in couture. What does that do to the psyche? Because she is a foreigner, not to Africa, but to this country. How does that look? What I'm saying? What are you implying when there's still rampant poverty? to joke around with the foolishness that's going on right now, Blouin was a tether. You know, she wasn't of, you know, Congolese stock. You know, so again, we can learn a lot from that struggle, and I would say that, you know, every non-victory can be a victory if, you know, we are serious about solving this problem. And Lumumba, Miss Blouin, they were serious about solving this problem. Unfortunately, they went up against the most powerful force on this planet. I'll close.
Much obliged. Victim in New Jersey. Keep it healthy. Hey, maybe she didn't put it in the book. Maybe she did have lots of, you know, dark complexioned black males and, you know, folks at the Lumumba rallies and throughout the Congo who were hitting on her and catcalling her and, you know, being all counts of, you know, patriarchal, sexist, no count black males, you know, just like we know here. Maybe. But that's not what we have heard in the text thus far. And like I said, the pictures and such, that's not there either. Them, you know, glowering at her and, you know, ogling her, and that's not that the pictures that I've seen. No. As a matter of fact, one more again. This is, see if I can get the source of this. Again, this is that big batch of reports, the Pompadour of the Congo, French publication. I'm skipping down. This is a massive report, like a page or two. And again, this is 200 pages. A document that looks like white people collated all this information in the 60s. So they didn't have Wi-Fi, they didn't have an iPhone and all that to make it easy. This looks like somebody had to go around, use a typewriter. Some of these reports are in French, so you got to have people who can translate, or it's in all these different dialects in the Congo and such that she talked about, who can translate that and all the rest of it. And white people collated all this stuff. Shit, got it at Stanford, Berkeley, all these different white labs. I'm sure you go to the library in Paris, Brussels, Belgium. Got all of it documented, laid out. Who ignorant about racism? Who co-authored this book? Facts, which is at the University of Washington Library. I think this might be one of those that you have to ask for. I take that back. Oh yeah, you do. You have to ask for it. It's not on the shelf. You have to ask for it. You can get it. You don't even have to be a student, but you have to ask for it. Same with Van Meersch, 700-page book. You have to ask for it, and they'll bring it to you. Ignorant about racism. But same report. It reads, the same year in 1959, Mrs. Blouin reappeared at the Hotel de France, a luxurious establishment in Conakry, garbed in a close-fitting black dress, adorned with a striking gilded dragon. All that. Come on. Come on. Like, nah, it's white people. You're the ones who are all, and again, it's all focused on her half-caste, and she's got a white parent, not too dark, and then super sexual. And part of her sexualization is around the fact that she's not too dark. She has a white parent. Anyway, much obliged. Victim in New Jersey, when he talked about causing that confusion, right, that we see today, and not even being aware, sometimes we end up fighting and clashing with each other and being confused about where this even started. I totally forgot way back when we read Chinua Achebe, Education of a British Education of a British Protected Child. We read that text, and he talked about, because he's Nigerian, we talked about the Biafra conflict. He included in that text, and white people have confirmed it was white people who funded Biafra. Was this region that said, we're going to break off, same thing we're reading about here, we're going to break off, secede, we're going to be independent from the rest of Nigeria. White people funded this conflict, black people fighting, killing other black people, that went on for years. If white people had not funded, this would have never happened. They talked about that, like this is the first time that you had a so-called humanitarian effort that funded a war that lasted for years, that if white people hadn't, again, same thing I said before when they said all these guns, mercenaries going into the Congo. Who are these gun sellers? Usual suspects. Same thing in Nigeria, where they got a lot of oil resources in Nigeria. But we already heard about this before. That's what I said. They are experts. That's why that no name calling, so important. Tether, name calling. Communist, name calling. Satan, name calling. It just goes on and on. Whore, name calling. Pompadour, name calling. Nobody does it better. White people. Let's see. We'll get in a few quick notes from the text before we get back to the book that we will be finishing next week. Cannot believe it. Cannot believe it. Let's see. Going back to where we started, the drama, her getting out of the country because of the diplomats' help, or with the diplomats' help. Oh, there are a lot of pictures in the text as well, so you can kind of see her in her different, attire of the time, and with different black people. Where's their eye gaze? What are they doing? What are they talking about? Does it seem like they're serious? Does it seem like party time? Woo! Where's the liquor at? Pass the Cavassier, like we heard from Jim Jones. Does that seem like it's happening in the picture? Or do they look serious? Some of these look staged, some of them don't. So you can judge for yourself, what's going on here. Let's see. So she's getting out, they're coming to get her again. She says, fortunately, I had very few things to pack. So important. Fuller talks about being frugal and not accumulating a whole lot of things for a lot of reasons. I think that's really important, being able to pack light. Let's see. She said, how the Czech ambassador had known I was in danger, I never knew. White people are not ignorant about racism. There was no time for my papers to be checked out. She's talking about Russian getting on the plane and everything. That is not 2024. Now, I guess maybe if you have a powerful white person, they can, get you through the hurry up TSA and all that. But man, I don't know. Like, you have to be really powerful white person to do all that by, especially if it's going to be a black person bypassing. Oh my God. Let's see. That word dignity popped up. Like I said, I'm glad the audio segment that I played at the beginning this week, you got to hear some of Patrice Lumumba's speech that people would say was such a big deal and what got him killed. Personally, I reject that. Even if he hadn't said any of that there, he could have probably been killed, or probably was going to be killed regardless. Like, we've got plans for what we want to do here, and you're just not in those plans, period. We got other things that we want to do for this region. So, if you want to blame it on this speech or any other specific incident, fine. But this was, like I said, they got in that document, do not send any more killers. We got it. There's an air of inevitability about this. Beyond this speech, well beyond this speech. We chop off hands of niggers in this land. Anyway, but she says dignity when he gets up to give his speech and talk about the truth of what happened. What is a dignified slave and what is a silly one? Especially in this environment where they chop off hands. Let's see. Next, and like I said, they have the pictures here. And man, they got her like front and center, speaking in front of what looks like probably thousands of people. There doesn't look like there's a mutiny, a riot. How do you get this, no count female down? We want a strong, proud African man up telling us what for and how things are going to be better and how we going to get rid of the white man and we patriarchal and what is she doing up there? That's not happening in the photo. They look like they are paying attention. Anyway, but they got a lot of pictures. Oh, there's another one. They got her pictured with some serious-looking black people. Nobody looks like they're... He slipped down her dress and, ooh, what's going on? And get some... None of that. Some of them aren't even looking at her. They're patriarchal. They don't pay attention to no female. They got her with a large group of people. Then nobody looks like they're mad. Like, get her away from around here. Whereas, bring a male. We listen to dudes. We don't listen to pay attention to no female. You don't tell me what to do. Let's see. Lots of pictures. Yum, yum. Okay. You see, throughout life, even when she gets older, lots of pictures. That's great. It seems like the Congo has always been in catastrophe. Like right now, King Leopold, anti-colonial 1960s. Like, I can't ever think of a time where it's just Dikembe Mutombo and black people in the Congo are chilling. Good times. We are doing it up. Everybody got their hands and feet. I mean, we are just chilling, eating good. I don't know when that is. I mean, let's see. She said, Lumumba inherited a scene set for disaster. Government officials and business people were resigning. People in the professions were leaving en masse. The Belgians, white people, had not trained replacements. There were few people in any field who were capable of taking responsibility. The workforce was made up of only copying clerks, blue-collar workers, and laborers. The most basic services began to go to pieces as the Belgians had hoped. That's tough and important. Fuller had said before that we are so ignorant and deliberately kept ignorant by people classified as white. All that special education and, put drugs on you and everything else and kick you out of school, suspension. We are kept so ignorant around the world and even in this book she talked about how they didn't have no school. They just learned how to be good slaves, praise white people and be obedient to master. That's what she told us. That we could not replace it, like fly the planes, make sure that the Wi-Fi is working and all that. It would be difficult for a lot of us to replace all that because we just haven't been trying. Like I said, who is reading all these books on most of the books written about the Congo and what happened with Lumumba, written by white, whether it's a white person in Belgium, white person in France, white person in the U.S. or wherever, but most of these books are written by somebody classified as white. They would have, matter of fact, even to accurately research all this, you kind of would have to be able to speak French and English, at least, maybe Lingala as well, but at least French, English. If you check a lot of the sources, bibliographies for the books written about this subject matter and time period, they're going to be bilingual, about half in English, half in French. That alone, just, you can't read French, you're going to be a little bit retarded in grasping everything it has here. Now, that's a much lower hurdle now because they got AI that can translate and all that, but still, it does slow you down a little bit. It's much easier to just pick a big book up immediately and start flipping through, as opposed to you got to go and translate. What? Okay, let's see. The Congolese soldiers refused to obey any longer the commands of their Belgian officers. They mutinied. Now, even that sentence right there is so different when the black soldiers refused to obey any longer the commands of their white officers. They mutinied because that's what this is. But I think it could be really easy to not think of it that, oh, that's what she means. Because that's what this is. All of the officers are white, and we're not objecting, and they fighting and killing and rioting and all of that. That's what this is about. This is not, we're not going to listen to the Belgian, no, the white man. Let's see. A white man, General Jansen in particular, was detested by his black troops. Scornfully, he had announced that he had thrown out independence, that he said was for civilians. Dang, so what are we? Refugees? Slaves? Satan? Monkeys? Non-humans. Non-civilians. That's what they said after Katrina. Told you. Let's see. The Belgians' reprisals greatly resembled techniques of the Nazis, by whom they had been trained. Patrice Lumumba tried to halt the riots, making personal appeals to each side for calm and reason. Man, they got a report about this here period in Newsweek, of course. This is Newsweek, September 12, 1960, Nights of Butchery. I'm skipping down. Trophies. And this isn't even with the officer mutiny. This is later on because they had so many of these brawls and such that went on, and the Belgian troops having to step in and get involved, and the white troops, having to step in. I just wanted to make sure that I included this for the time period. Just, man. So they have a picture of a black male. Looks like he's upset, might be one of the protesters, and an officer who looks like it might be a black person, but I'm not sure because his back is to the camera. So not sure, could be a black officer, but he's got his arm under this black protester's throat like he's choking him as he's dragging him away from the area. And the caption reads, "Rioters. Hands were chopped off. I was staggered." Now, they had been chopping off hands and all that before and doing this for a long time, so whatever. But I mean, just wow, all of this going on. Like I said, they put this in the newspaper all the time. Even the artwork that they use for some of these descriptions is wild. When I say wild, the race, like they got Lumumba looking like a minstrel depiction many times, frequently, over and over again. They got black people in general looking like minstrel depictions. These are supposed to be Congolese, but that's what I say. Niggers is niggers, man. Niggers is niggers, but whatever. Just the artwork, even if you don't read the reports, some of them are, longer than others. Some of them are just short and, to the point. But man, the pictures and illustrations alone convey 1,000 words or more of white supremacy racism about what was happening in the Congo, especially if you just read the Newsweek. Or the images around Miss Blouin as well, because she's in a lot of the pictures. They mention her in Newsweek too. Let's see. Anything else before we get to he said that, or she said rather, once they started rioting, they weren't going to have white officers anymore. The men had been taught to shoot even their own brothers, and they had arms and ammunition, so they took their revenge wherever they could find it, on the Congolese black population as well as on the Europeans. The revolt spread through the city blindly like a disease. It has been terrible. Now, I mean, that right there is why Mr. Fuller has such explicit rules. I noted in his code book that the section on violence was so much longer than most, if not all, of the other sections of the code book. There's so much detail, and there's such a big portion about, hey, if it's going to be some counter violence and you think you need to do some harm, it needs to be directed against individuals classified as white that you think these folks are race soldiers. I am not going out here and doing no counter violence where non-white people, victims of racism, are harmed. It is totally unacceptable. I'm mad about racism, and I got to take it out on somebody, so I'm fitting to go out here. I'm going to kill me a few black people because I'm mad. What? I got some guns, and I got to shoot somebody, so I'm going to shoot me a few of these black people. You know, monkeys been cooning, and you've been teaming up with the Belgian white people anyway, so I'm going to go out and take it out on you. What? That is insanity. That's Rwanda and all the rest. That is insanity. If the problem is white people, that's where you point. If I got to go upside somebody's head, racist man, racist woman, that's where you go. Now, if you're not ready to do that, then you're not really ready to go up. You're not ready for no counter violence. You don't need to go upside anybody's head. Don't chicken out and just go find some lame, unarmed black person. I'm mad. I'm upset about racism. I got to take it. No. Come on. That's lame. That's cowardly. And we've been doing that cowardly chump behavior. I said that after Christopher Dorner, 2013, right after the so-called Super Bowl. It was during the so-called Super Bowl. Colin Kaepernick out there losing. He went out there and said he upset about racism and then killed a black dude and a non-white female. They didn't even work for LAPD. He said, what is this? I'm upset about racism, so I'm going to go kill 2 non-white people. No, that is totally incorrect. We talked with Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller about that at the time. That is totally incorrect, but that's generally our pattern, our being non-white people. We get upset about white supremacy, racism. We take it out on other non-white people, and that is insanity. But that's how white people have trained us worldwide, apparently. Worldwide. Let's see. They called them monkeys. She said, hate breeds hate. The word macaca, a species of monkey, was used as an epithet for blacks by the Europeans, even by the children. What? Lord, you got the planet of the apes. And the Congolese thought that the word Falamand, a corruption of Flamand, said with terrible scorn, was the supreme insult. Is that like for white people? They'd have to tell me, like, is that because and even what does that mean? Yeah. Anyway, let's see. Anything else? She talks about Katanga again. They had so-called secession, the white people, all the minerals and such, where she says that they have gold, cobalt, chrome, platinum, pewter, diamonds, jewelry, manganese, nickel, rare metal, uranium. Got to have those bombs. Asbestos, lead. It just goes on and on and on. Like, if they didn't have all these riches in Katanga, would white people have funded them and given them arms and all the rest of it? We got to do something about, Lumumba. So, yeah, we're going to find us some black people, Kosuvu, and the rest of these folks that'll work with us. We can get rid of Mobutu. I don't think so. If there's been a whole dried up desert area and barren land, you don't have no copper and reserves, no cobalt, we can get our iPhones and such, like, we find another way. I mean, we got lots of ways to kill Lumumba. I mean, that's we don't have to mess around with you niggers at all. They would have missed out. Just happened to be, you got some, okay, well, we're going to get what we want, and we'll do a little racial showcasing, make it seem like you are in charge, even though we put you there, and then we go and get our goodies and control the rest of the niggers in the area. Whoopee. Any niggers get out of line, hey, you should just pull out that jar. You know whose teeth those are. Whole lot of more space in that jar. Couldn't even have a proper burial for Patrice Lumumba, Make people behave. Anything else? Let's see. They said one of the Belgians pulled the prime minister, talking about Lumumba's beard, and slapped him. President of the monkeys, Planet of the Apes. European women screamed at the top of their voices, "We will come back, bastard, murderer, son of a bitch." Others spit in his face. Lumumba remained dignified. He always was and always would be dignified. I have no idea what that meant. Hey, man, we about to take you to your final execution, and we're going to snap. I don't know if they took the teeth before or after the execution. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to be dignified. They made a Hollywood biopic, fictional version of all of this and the assassination of Lumumba. They dramatized this scene at the airport of the white women coming out and spitting in his face. Monkey, son, bitch, will kill you. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. What doesn't they? I'm glad they got the white women in there. Not just white, they got white women. Mad. Scratch your eyeballs out. Like, ooh, monkey. Planet of the Apes, man. Planet of the Apes. Which was written 2 years. Oh, wait a minute. This is 1960. 4 years. The book was written 4 years after all these events unfolded. And written in French. I pointed that out at a discourse on France and white supremacy. They looked at me like I was crazy. The book was written in France by a Frenchman after he came back from Vietnam, but I mean, neither here nor there. Whatever. Planet of the Apes. Audio segment number 2. My Country, Africa. Andrée Blouin. Home stretch. More about Patrice Lumumba.
Chapter 22. Lumumba's downfall and ruin. Lumumba's victory was ephemeral, and he knew it. Soon after this there was to appear in the halls of power the sinister figure chosen earlier by Belgium and the United States to replace him, Mobutu. Like the secession of Katanga, carried out by Chombe, the takeover of the Congo by Mobutu had been prepared at the Round Table. It was with the treachery of these two creatures that the Congo's ruin was prepared. Mobutu, an army sergeant and member of the NCM, was a minister without portfolio in Lumumba's government. After the army's revolt, Lumumba made him a colonel. His earlier activities, I learned later, had included being a spy for both the Belgian intelligence and the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. It was not enough that Lumumba had the Belgian government and all its unscrupulous maneuvers to deal with. The young state, because of its riches and its evident weakness, also became the pawn of the two giants of politics, the East and the West. The echoes of the Cold War found a new sounding board in the Congo, this bastion of international trusts. Here, communism and capitalism faced one another like the rhinoceros and the elephant. The fabulous Union Minière, it should be pointed out, was controlled by three groups of stockholders, the Belgian Corporation, the Special Board of Katanga, and an Anglo-American company, Oppenheim de Beers, through the intermediary of the Tanganyika Concession, Limited, firmly supported by his two principal backers and sure of the complicity of the United Nations. Mobutu carried off his coup d'état of September 14, after buying, with millions of francs, a readiness for his rise to power. The theme of his right to the takeover, the hook with which he ensured the cooperation of the West, was anti-communism. Because of him, many Congolese died, including its own best son. It is true that copper has the color of blood and mud. The days that followed Mobutu's seizing of power were like a modern apocalypse. The Congo was on the edge of madness. C.O.W.S had at least pretended to conform to the constitutional laws drawn up by Belgian lawyers. Mobutu made no such pretenses. Democracy was completely overthrown and replaced by a military dictatorship. The National Assembly was closed by Mobutu's orders, and rigorously guarded by soldiers. The last session of the Assembly was the one in which Lumumba had been confirmed. The Casques Blues prevented Lumumba from speaking to the people on the radio. Bomboko, Minister of Foreign Affairs, produced a crop of freshly milled young Congolese technocrats who acted as the shock troops, appearing everywhere to justify Mobutu's takeover. Bomboko was, at that moment, a man to be reckoned with. In a press conference the morning before the coup d'état, he announced the measures deemed necessary to prevent communist penetration in the Congo. These measures involved the expulsion of certain undesirable elements, the Ghanaian and Guinean contingents, the Egyptians, Felix Mumir, a Cameroon leader, and Madame Blouin. When the order for my expulsion was announced on the radio, my mother was stricken by a heart attack. She was hospitalized immediately. I was supposed to leave the city within 24 hours, but Josephine's condition was so serious that I phoned Mobutu to tell him that I could not leave her in such a critical state. Informed method an order for my arrest had been issued by the chief of state, C.O.W.S, and sent to him for execution. But he would allow me another 48 hours. Gizenga was arrested and placed in an underground prison 25 kilometers from Leo. Hearing of this, the Mupende warriors, the most fearsome in the Congo, prepared to liberate their chief. They sent warning telegrams to Mobutu. If Gizenga is not released tomorrow, all the missionaries and Europeans of Kouelu will be killed. Gizenga was released instead of being transferred, as planned, to Katanga, where he would of course have been put to death. Lumumba's cavalry began with Mobutu's takeover. From then on the conspiracies against him were carried on openly. Each day, C.O.W.S crossed the river to Brazzaville to consult with Yulu and the Belgian embassy there on decisions for the young republic. Patrice Lumumba knew that his life was in the hands of Mobutu. Fearing Mobutu's intentions, he put himself under the protection of the United Nations, which stationed guards around his residence. But Mobutu's troops, with machine guns, also encircled the residence of Patrice Lumumba. It was then I remembered an appeal that Lumumba, heartbroken, had made on the radio, to the people one day. My Congolese brothers. You're selling your country for a glass of beer. A tragedy is engulfing our country, and the dancing continues at the site Congolaise. Leopoldville is a cheap cabaret where the people think only of their pleasures, dancing and beer. The Congo was sinking, the Congo was dying, and the best of its children was soon to be assassinated. Still the Congo danced. Perhaps the heart was less festive, but the dancing did not stop. Before the curfew, around the crates of beer, the Congo danced. Cut off in his residence, Patrice Lumumba lived his last days with courage and daring. 3 days after the coup d'état I was summoned to see Mobutu at his military camp. The order specified that my husband was to be with me. We had no alternative, we were, already, in effect, prisoners. I wondered if this summons were not a trap to seize us, inside the military camp, where Mobutu was responsible to no one. But I was so desperate to remain a few days longer with my mother at this critical moment for her that I would do anything. Trembling, I presented myself with my husband to Mobutu, who was surrounded by guards. He had a nervous air, however, as he said, "Look at these telegrams from Belgium. I received more than 200 this morning. They are scolding me for the release of Gizenga and the others of the ASP. Oh, this coup d'état will surely end badly. I shan't come out of it alive." To me he added, "As for you, I can't do anything for you. You can stay a few days more because of your mother, but I know your enemies will renew their demands for your expulsion soon." "But what have they got against me?" I asked. As if I didn't know. "I can't answer that. The order comes from far away, very far away. Here is what you must do," he said, adopting an almost conspiratorial manner. "Leave Leo. I'll have you taken to an island that is between the two Congos. You can wait there until things become quiet again. In a month or so you can come back. We need you in the Congo." He used the intimate form, like tu, in Sango as he spoke. "Stay home," he said, "don't go out under any circumstances." I glanced at the heavily armed military camp around me. Mobutu's offer made my flesh creep. An island between the two Congos. I had no desire to become a meal for the Congo's crocodiles, but I was powerless and knew it. My fate depended on the orders that C.O.W.S and Mobutu received from Brazzaville, where Radio Congo broadcast for hours each day the most vile calumnies against us. But that didn't matter. The important thing was to remain a few days more with my mother. Trapped in his residence, Patrice Lumumba continued to fight. He was permitted to receive a few faithful friends and some diplomats. This measure of privilege was to make it seem as though he were not a prisoner. No one dared execute him yet, as planned. That was not for lack of hatred but because, to tell the truth, Patrice Lumumba still impressed his enemies. He remained ready to talk with even those who had betrayed him. He explained, he pleaded for African unity, he planned. He knew that he was still the legal prime minister, elected by the National Assembly. This was true. But there was another truth which could no longer be ignored. No one listened to Patrice Lumumba anymore. His was a voice from the past. He was secretly admired by all. Everyone knew that there was no one equal to this great African. But politically he was dead. Invisible hands were strangling him, and those invisible hands came from far away. Very far away. One October day, in a burst of superhuman energy, and with the help of some conspirators, Lumumba secretly left his residence to go to the site Congolese. He believed he could still arouse the people to action and reverse the situation. He saw it as his duty to denounce publicly Mobutu's coup d'état. Standing in an open car, he spoke to the crowd. Once again he held them with the magic of his words. Hypnotized by his almost forgotten presence, their enthusiasm was reborn. "Long live Lumumba," they shouted. "Long live Lumumba." An ironic phrase, indeed. Mobutu's army was already hunting the prisoner. After travel the main streets of the city, Lumumba managed to escape their net and to return, safe and sound, to his residence. That evening there were hundreds of arrests of Lumumba's supporters by the executioner Ndeka, who moved them to Bakwanga to be killed. The wife of Patrice's cook visited me from time to give me the news inside the residence. Through her I sent a letter to Patrice. I expressed anew my admiration for him and reassured him of my loyalty and confidence. I also told him of my unbearable sense of isolation during these hours when I so yearned to be useful to him. That same evening I received an answer from this man whose fraternity and optimism were matchless. It read, "Dear Madame Blouin, I received your letter today. The first thing I must tell you is that we shall never let you down. Our difficulties are certainly many, but I have the firm hope that we shall win. Know that you can always count on me, through thick and thin. For my part, I am used to adversity. My warm greetings to your husband. Monsieur Blouin. Be strong. Indeed, sincerely, signed, P. Lumumba." It was our last contact. It was also the farewell letter of a true hero of modern times. This letter gave me great comfort, and everything I had worked for was disintegrating around me. Even in his own moment of peril, Patrice was able to send me strength. I could almost see his smile, behind his brave words. I was relieved to meet Gizenga again, after his narrow escape. He told me he'd been rescued just as he was boarding the plane that was to take him to Elizabethville to be hanged the same day. Gizenga had a new plan. He was leaving secretly for Stanleyville to gather the military of the eastern part of the country around a new legal government for Lumumba. There, Lumumba and his friends could count on the population's loyalty. Stanleyville would become the new capital of the Republic of the Congo. "But you'll have to cross Kasai," I protested. "Yes," Gizenga said stolidly. "But I'll do it, on foot, if I must." That night he left us, headed for Kikui, from whence he would enter that extremely dangerous territory, Kasai. He had only one thought, to save the legal government of the Congo. He deliberately risked his life to do so. This was the venture of a brave man, indeed, for which I felt the deepest admiration and respect. In November, Gizenga sent word that he had taken power in Stanleyville in Lumumba's name. The people were awaiting his arrival. The moment that Lumumba chose to escape his encircled residence seemed propitious. On that day, all the major personalities of the regime were in Brazzaville. Yulu was giving a banquet in honor of his collaborators, Kasavubu, Mobutu, Chambe, Bamboko, and a number of the commissioners. Security was lax. With this stroke of good luck, Lumumba slipped away and was not missed for some hours. A convoy of several vehicles had been prepared for the flight. Madame Lumumba, her children, and a handful of NCM members were waiting when Lumumba appeared, and they set off for Stanleyville. Unfortunately, they did not move swiftly. Several times Patrice stopped to speak in towns and villages, to denounce Mobutu's coup d'état. This proved to be a fatal blunder. The convoy made a wide sweep through the interior of the country, delaying the group's arrival in safe territory, controlled by the NCM, by 10 hours. It was at this stage of the trip that the convoy was spotted. When the news of the escape was delivered to the presidential palace of Yulu, there was, of course, a general panic. At once a massive search was instituted. All resources and strategies were united in the single aim to recapture the Prime Minister, dead or alive. One of the searching helicopters spotted the convoy not far from the Sankuru River. By radio they alerted the Lolubourg soldiers who hastened to the ferry landing where the convoy was making the crossing. The Prime Minister's car had already been delivered to the other side when the soldiers arrived. The ferry was about to return for Madame Lumumba and the others. From his side of the river Patrice saw his wife brutally seized by the soldiers. It was then he made an unforgivable mistake. Unable to bear the screams of his wife, begging him to save her, Lumumba betrayed the Congolese people. He ordered the ferryman to take him back across the river. The good friends who were with him, one of them Pierre Mulliel, begged Patrice not to go back, for the life of the whole nation was at stake. But Lumumba could hear only his wife's cries on the other side of the river. He returned. There he was taken. Mpongo, the black mercenary, arrived quickly, getting out of a United Nations helicopter. This well-known figure was unsurpassed in his cruelty. Lumumba now belonged to his executioners. The Baluba soldiers abandoned themselves to violence, behaving atrociously toward Lumumba. As always, in spite of his pain, Lumumba remained dignified. The helicopter took off and headed for the capital to deliver the fugitive to Mobutu. Before a crowd of curious spectators at Leopoldville, Lumumba was forced out of the helicopter, his arms tightly bound behind him. The international press photos of the scene revealed the truth about this leader who was made to live in men's hearts forever. The contrast between him and his white captors was extraordinary. Their malicious glee was painful to behold. On Lumumba's dazed face was the look of a man who did not yet believe that fate could be against justice for his people. His white shirt was now spotted with blood, but his head was still erect. He personified the best of a race that would never again be slaves. Lumumba's calvary in prison lasted 4 months. During this time the League for the Rights of Man protested vigorously against the trumped-up charges against him and attacked Dag Hammarskjöld for his undisguised complicity. Even some of the capitalist newspapers joined in this protest. The Prime Minister was transferred to the prison of Camp Hardy at Thisville on December 3. He would be taken out only to be delivered to Chombe in Katanga. One version of how the prisoner was taken to Katanga is that the first destination was Bakwanga, where dozens of Lumumba's followers had been taken to a frightful death. But the Belgian pilot of the plane, fearing for his own safety, at the last moment refused to land there, declaring he didn't want to be eaten by cannibals. So the plane set a new course for Elizabethville in Katanga. One member of the crew asserted that Lumumba and his companions were already no more than a mass of bloody flesh. Lumumba seemed lifeless because one of the soldiers yanked out a tuft of his hair, bringing with it a large piece of his scalp, but Lumumba no longer reacted. Another version, taken from the United Nations inquiry into the circumstances of these murders says, the witness, who wishes to remain anonymous, declared that Lumumba and his companions were transferred from Thisville to Moanda, and from there to Elizabethville, and that during the trip they were savagely mistreated by their soldier escort. When they arrived in Elizabethville, Lumumba and his companions were loaded on a truck and taken to a place some kilometers from the airport. Munango, who was waiting for them, went to Lumumba and, seizing the bayonet of a soldier's gun, thrust it into Lumumba's stomach. Lumumba screamed, dying. A certain Captain Ruiz, a Belgian mercenary in the Katanga army, put an end to his sufferings by firing a shot into his skull. Throughout the world, rage and revolt at the news exploded. Blacks everywhere were stricken with grief and fury. The whole great black family was convulsed with pain. In the United Nations, in an extraordinary session, men spoke of the young black who had been assassinated somewhere, over there, in Africa, while outside, American blacks rioted and were clubbed down as they shouted, "Long live Lumumba." From that day on, a once indifferent world was to have a new recognition of the deep ties binding black people together. It was not only at the United Nations headquarters in New York that there were demonstrations. The chancelleries of Belgium and the United States were sacked or burned in many of the capitals. President Kennedy made a statement expressing his disapproval of the assassination. Several days later, Kasavubu, in an interview with a journalist, remarked in his soft, pointed voice, "The protests about this death are strange. The Congolese people, you see, are quite calm. Nothing has happened here. Nothing. The foreigners are the only ones who are making a commotion." The United Nations Commission of Inquiry came to the Congo to study the circumstances of the death of Lumumba and his companions. C.O.W.S received the commission. When Lumumba's name was pronounced, the chief of state refused to continue the conversation. The commission and the UN Secretary-General did nothing. The complicity continued. I was not in the Congo on January 17, 1961, at the time of Lumumba's death. 3 months earlier, in November of 1960, the order for my expulsion had been carried out. For days our house had been surrounded by troops armed with machine guns, and we had been expecting the dreaded knock on the door at any time. Then, early one morning, 2 jeeps loaded with soldiers stopped in front of the house. Gilbert Mpongo, General Commissioner from the Ministry of the Interior, dismounted and presented me with the order for my expulsion. The soldiers crowded into the house after him and made themselves at home. They asked for food and drink with a naturalness that confused me. They played with Sylvian and my son Patrick, who was 8, allowing them to handle their weapons, to the children's delight. I was half prepared for the event, so there were not many things to pack. Still, at this last moment I could not really accept what was happening. The order specified, "Madame Blouin, my children," I begged. "Let me take them with me." "No, your children and your husband will not be permitted to go with you," Mpongo informed me. At the airport, before the departure of the plane, he reminded me that my loved ones were being held by the government as hostage against my good behavior. Don't forget. Not a word about the Congo to the world press. The smallest remark will cost them dearly. I closed my eyes so as not to cry, not to scream, not to faint. Then he added a curious apology. "Excuse us, these are our orders. We have to carry them out. It's not our fault."
Katherine, Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Guess we can all come to our own conclusions about if that's true. It's not our fault. Sounded like Sue Klebold. But I do know who is most to blame. Whether or not it's their fault, I guess they could say that's debatable, but who is most to blame? Usual suspects. One more time. People classified as white. The part that we just heard, them threatening her and, not a word and all that, that is read in the film soundtrack to a coup d'etat. The number 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Smoothie break. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Health is wealth, that's what he said. Man, darn tootin'. Can't be going to the gym or doing your yoga, go swimming, hiking, then come back and eat Cheetos, Lunchables. Get you old strawberry, banana, peanut butter smoothie. Woof. Ridiculous. Okay, let's see. We'll nab one email, then nab the rest of our callers. Like I said, there's been so much more information about all of these events since this book was published. This so much was soundtrack to a coup d'etat. There's so much more about what transpired and the role of white people in all of this. And yeah, I will say, fun fact, there was a black child friend of mine in school who was named Shambe, spelled exactly the same way and everything, and I didn't realize until years later who Shambe was in relation to Lumumba. And after I found out, I was like, oh man, if I could go back retroactively, we would not have been cool. Like, man, if you are not cool with Lumumba, you are not cool with Gus T. Peace, Shambe. We can't even, we can't play ball or nothing. Go look up your namesake. That ain't even cool, man. That ain't even cool. Tell your parents that ain't even cool, man. That ain't even cool. That's halfway related. Let's see. Email number 1. Greetings, Gus, listeners and callers. I've been trying to expand my knowledge of the Congo. Maybe we should all do. If you got an iPhone, get to expanding. Maybe you can download some books on your cool iPhone. Cobalt Red, that could be 1. King Leopold's Ghost, that could be 2. The Lumumba Plot, that could be 3. You get Lumumba's book. He wrote an autobiography. I think it's in French, but it's been translated to English. I mean, there are bunches of books. You know, you could load on that iPhone and then you could read. Dang, this is what all my black brothers suffered through to get me my iPhone 16? Dang. I recently completed another text, Forest of No Joy. I believe I mentioned that book previously when they were talking about the railroad that was constructed in the Congo so white people could get all of their loot efficiently out of Africa. They got a whole book about all the black people that was slaughtered and hands hacked off and feet and toes and all that good stuff. Forest of No Joy, I believe written by a white man. The book speculates that the AIDS virus originated in the Congo during the construction due to the widespread starvation, contamination of food, disease, torture, population dislocation, etc., perpetuated by white supremacists, causing immune deficiency among the population during the construction. Now, that is staggering. But they did say genocide against me. Again, hey, all that abuse does not make you stronger. It makes you weaker. Renelia Randall told us that first year the cows is in existence. Let's see. Congolese were done. As discussed on the most recent compensatory call-in podcast, a new deadly undiagnosed virus is being investigated currently in the Congo. They just talked about that in the New York Times, NPR, Racks, take your pick. But yes, they've been talking about this quite a bit over the last month, maybe longer, at least last month. Chapter 20, Patrice Lumumba, Prime Minister of the Republic of the Congo, assumed was awesome. On his young shoulders, he was then 34 years old. Additional African continent leaders, spokespersons who were assassinated, Thomas Sankara, leader of Burkina Faso, Samora Machel, first president of Mozambique, Amilcar Cabral, I quote him often, leader of Guinea, Bissau, Felix Momi, leader of Cameroon, Eduardo Mondlane, founding president of Frelimo, Thomas Mapikela, leader of South Africa, Chris Haney, leader of South Africa. I guess you could put Steve Biko on there, maybe. There's probably tons of people. It's probably tons of people you could add to this list. They're just going forever. MLK, Malcolm X, yada, long list. 2. The Belgians' reprisals greatly resemble techniques of the Nazis by whom they had been trained. Didn't the Belgians murder 7 to 15 million Congolese under the direction of King Leopold? Yep. I bet the Belgians could have taught the Nazis a thing or two. Yeah, they seemed like they had learned pretty well. 3. The men had been taught to shoot even their own brothers. They took their revenge wherever they could find it, on the Congolese population as well as on the Europeans. Talk about it. He got our sound clip, so I guess we'll see if we can do it proper. Let's see.
Black brother hell.
There you go. 4. If the Congolese mistreated the Belgians, it was often to try to keep them from leaving the Congo. They did not want the whites to go. The word macaca A species of monkey was used as an epithet for blacks by the Europeans, even by the children. And the Congolese thought that the word Falamand, a corruption of Flamand, said with terrible scorn, was the supreme insult. Reminds me when Mr. Fuller facetiously says non-white people say, how do we get where the white people at? I could not find anything on the definition of Falamand. I'm going to have to look because I don't know what that means. 5. I cannot speak of Katanga without mentioning its extraordinary reservoir of minerals. This was the reason the Belgians would not give up control of this province no matter the cost in money or murder, and move to separate it from the rest of the Congo. That's why I said it didn't really matter what Lumumba said. If he made a speech, if he had remained quiet, if he had got his tonsils removed that week and couldn't say a word, it didn't really matter. Like, we already got plans about what we're going to do here, and you are not in these plans. Like, hey, man, don't send no more hitmen. We got it. This nigga is gone. It's just a matter of time. And they do call him a nigger in the movie with the receipts. I mean, you know, niggers is... I should copyright that because I say that. Niggers is niggers. 6. He wanted the parachutists to leave so that life could be normal again. What does parachutist mean in this context? I was thinking troops and other whites, could even be non-white people who came in to restore white order. That's what I was thinking. I had to go back and double check because I could be wrong. And then French and all that translation, I could be wrong. 7. The Prime Minister knew that the United States was supporting Belgians' underhanded maneuvers in the Congo, but we decided to act as if we did not know in order to bring into the open what the position of the United States was doing. Lumumba was then asked the United Nations for help. Asking the UN for help, it is also controlled by the racist white supremacists. Yeah, and they might not have known this. I mean, who knows? So-called independence of the country, and who knows? Who knows? Malcolm X was doing the same thing at this time period, right? I'm going to go to the UN with our case. We're going to make a case that this is a human rights violation. We're going to go to the UN. Same thing, right? White people control. So, I mean, we were still learning. We are, and certainly back then, still learning. So we didn't have a correct understanding at that time. But we're a little bit better than that. Not much better, but like a teaspoon. Maybe. Anyway, Chapter 21. The United Nations also sent technicians dressed like businessmen. There were swarms of Haitians among them. Now, white people under normal circumstances, they wouldn't give a Haitian a sardine. Look at all that stuff that happened. Said, oh, my Lord, they got the gangs and the shooting. Oh, he killed 100. Oh, that's them niggers down in Haiti. See, should have behaved. The French were trying to tell you. French again. See, it was French try to tell you, you got two sons. You got to listen, do it your own ways. That sort of thing. They went, what? We gonna go hire a whole bunch of Haitians? What? When have you heard in your life white people say we gonna hire as many of them Haitians as they just said that the Haitians were stealing the I can't even get up, man. They just said that the Haitians then stole Lassie and Rin Tin Tin and the rest of our pets and everything. We getting ready for Christmas, man? No. No, I'm not hiring no, particularly we got to put them in a suit, maybe get them a passport, fly them to another country. Come on, get right. Let's see. He said, I presume the technicians were white, and of course they got non-white victims, Haitians, to inflict direct harm on other non-white victims. And I'm going to tell you, hey, if I'm in Haiti, particularly at this time here, even now, after the earthquake, oh my God, they come and say, look here, my Haitian brother, speaking French too. We can use that. You speak parlez-vous français? Oh my goodness, we got a job for you. Come on in here. Look here. We get you out of do whatever. Look here. You don't even have to spell Congo. We're gonna get you straight. We're gonna get you some food for sure, and we'll fly you over to the Congo, and you go connect with your brothers and sisters, and you just report back to us. We'll pay you. It'll be a great job. Hey, maybe we even hook you up. You could get your old citizenship for the U.S. of A. You do a good job. Who is not going to take that? Incidentally, that'd be another one. I could play the sound clip again. One more time. Black brother. 2. Secretary General of the United Nations Dag Hammarskjöld. Oh my God, I kicked myself so bad. They had a whole documentary just about him at the Seattle International Film Festival, but it was at a really curious time, and I missed it. So they had like 200 films, so I mean, hey. But I missed it. I totally would have seen, because he's right there in Soundtrack to Coup d'etat. He's in this book. I'm so mad that I missed that film to see, what they would have included about this, but I'm sure it'll be available. Man. Anyway, suspected racist Swedish economist and diplomat sent 20,000 troops to the Congo, apparently provided no help to Lumumba, died in a plane crash while on his way in the Congo to negotiate a ceasefire. There's lots of conspiracies about that and what transpired after that and all that. Venerated as a hero by JFK and posthumously received the Nobel Prize, does not receive the same praise from the Congolese, as he shouldn't. 3. Named my husband as director of mines for the Congo. Dang, white man still in charge. I said the same thing. I even said, dang, is that nepotism? If you're his homie and then and then for sure white people still are just, Jesus Christ. 4. Calumnies, false charges to maliciously harm someone's reputation. Calumnies. I have to make sure I pronounce that correctly. 5. My husband got over his initial reaction, although he remained edgy about my giving so much of myself to my work. Maybe he did not like your closeness to Lumumba. I suspect that that's true. But also, as I read like a number of those reports, I think also this is a white man seeing his black female described basically as a whore all over the world, and a whore in this tight-fitting black dress, and a whore doing this, and she's sleeping with C.O.W.S, and sleeping with Patrice Lumumba, and sleeping with this black person. And what white man wants to see that? And they're like, whoa, I did not sign up for this. Like, you don't be saying I'm married to some mulatto mystery hooker woman out here. Whoa. And he says, well, they talk the same way. I don't care about you out here talking all that nonsense. I don't care about none of that. It's my wife here. They talking about I'm not married to no Negro. People are already upset about that anyway. Like, you got this old half-case woman. Like, why don't you get a white one and behave yourself? Let's see. Number 8, the next day, the picture was on the front page of the Capitol with her dressed up, asserting that this was proof that I had been bought out by Mr. Gromyko, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Soviet Union. Have not heard that name for a long time. He was constantly in the news, negotiating the Cuban Missile Crisis, nuclear test ban treaties, and the policy of detente, attempting to lessen the tensions between the Soviet Union and the USA. Let's see. 9. Traitors were organizing everywhere, even in Lumumba's cabinet. Lumumba replied, patience, my sister. Try to have patience. I know it's difficult, but our opponents will get tired. We will have the last word. You'll see. I lowered my eyes to keep Patrice from seeing my profound frustration and distress at his naive reasoning. Too late to stop this infernal grinding machine that had been set in motion by the Congo crisis. Naive, or maybe he understood that he had no way out and he did not want to show fear or panic. Grinding machine seems like a metaphor. There were a number of important metaphors in this section. Chapter 22, Lumumba's victory. I don't know, it could be autocorrect or what have you, but even if it is, Lumumba, it's Lumumba. Names are important, and they ridicule him and all that. Could have been autocorrect with the computer and such. Lumumba's victory was ephemeral, sinister figure chosen earlier by Belgium and the United States to replace him, Mobutu. His earlier activities, I learned later, had included being a spy for both Belgian intelligence and the CIA. We need to just accept the fact that all these organizations, Black Lives Matter, Congressional Black Caucus, NAACP, are infiltrated directly or indirectly by racist white supremacists, which would lead, this is me talking now, which would lead to Fuller's conclusion that the four-wall method is a total failure. It's not going to work. Any sort of, this is our group, our black people, even if we restrict it, it's only people classified as black with 8 great-grandparents all born in Mississippi, no pretend niggers, and whatever other criterion you want to set up, it doesn't matter. It's going to fail. White people are the best. They're masters at figuring out ways of infiltrating. Let's see. Firmly supported by his two principal backers and sure of the complicity of the United Nations, Mobutu carried off his coup d'etat of September 14th after buying with millions of francs a readiness for his rise to power. Money is never going to be an equalizer for non-white people. The racist white supremacists always have more in a global system of racism, white supremacy. They print it out and put their pictures on it. Not to mention they decide the value of it, so they got us all the way around. From his side of the river, Patrice saw his wife brutally seized by soldiers, patriarch. It was then when he made the unforgivable mistake, unable to bear the screams of his wife, patriarch, begging him to save her. Lumumba betrayed the Congolese people. He ordered the ferryman to take him back across the river. Mistake, betrayal, this seems harsh on Madame Blouin's part. I did think the wording there was certainly curious. Now, it could be, hey, patriarch, because that's what they say. You're patriarch because they say that's white patriarch. And when they say, I got to go out and protect these women and be the hero, go out and say, you don't brutalize my woman, that was Patrice Lumumba. No, I'm a good patriarch. I got to be a man. You don't brutalize it. Step back, stick out my chest and rip off my shirt. I got to be a man. It could be. He was just being an old patriarch. Maybe. But I don't know. I mean, I think many people, even if it was the other way around, if it was Patrice Lumumba that was being beaten and tortured and his wife was the one that was free and she had the option that you can escape or you can go back and try and, get your husband, even though that might be futile. I think a lot of wives, oh my God, that's my attempted partner. I'm going to go back and I'm not going to I'm not going to, get scared, chicken out. That's what I was thinking of. I'm not going to chicken out and, I'm just going to leave, I'm going to go back and try and say, I think a lot of people, if it was somebody that they cared about. So, yeah, at minimum, it's curious. Why would that be a mistake or a betrayal? That's certainly man, even like I said, even if he didn't turn around, this is like a lot, there's so much more information now. This was going to happen, meaning Lumumba was going to be killed. It was just a matter of time. Turn around, don't turn around, they make it. They were talking about poison alligators and all this old foolishness. It was just a matter of time. Let's see. American blacks rioted and were clubbed down as they shouted, "Long live Lumumba." They didn't say it. Don't you call me no Congolese, and I'm a authentic black American. You don't call me no, because that ain't got nothing to do with me. They didn't say that. And they was like Minister Malcolm X, Abby Lincoln, Dr. Maya Angelou wrote a book about it, The Heart of a Woman. And lots of other people classified as black. Rioted all over the world. Rioted in France, New York, all over the world. Global system of white supremacy. White people all over the world were complicit in this. Our listener writes, President Kennedy made a statement expressing his disapproval of the assassination. He's complicit too. Racist white supremacists are on both sides of the... there you go, right there, because he was complicit too. And complicit in the COINTELPRO on this side of the world with black people, the Lumumbas of this side, MLK and all the rest of them, so whatever. Let's see. Oh, we didn't get that far. We'll pause. We will return next week as we get ready to wrap up the text. Let's see, other emails, untiljustice@gmail.com. Let's see, Victim in New Jersey, did you have commentary on the second portion of the book from the office, Victim in New Jersey?
Yeah, Gus. Please let me know if it's noisy. I have to change my earpiece. You know what? Okay, to go back to when she said that she felt that it was a betrayal. that Lumumba went back for his wife. I'm assuming that at that time she believed that Lumumba's life was more important. So Lumumba at the time, in her mind, may have been the movement, and him surviving maybe have been more important than him sacrificing his life for his wife. But knowing what I know and knowing what we know now, I believe if Lumumba wasn't even killed, that movement was going to be neutralized. Whether he was exiled, somewhere. Not to disparage Lumumba's movement, but his movement was too heavily infiltrated. It was I could see no way that even if he would have survived, how effective he would have been. Sending the Haitian troops to the Congo, they're doing that. They're still practicing this. If I'm not mistaken, they sent Kenyan peace soldiers, if I'm saying it correctly, peacekeepers, to Haiti in reverse. So, maybe 50-odd years before, it was Haitians being sent to the Congo. 50 years, 60 years later, there's Kenyan troops being sent to Haiti. You know what? It's like now that I'm, after reading the Jim Jones piece, reading this piece, which I say the book, which is a great book, this book here. I can say that I'm very slow, and you've been saying this for a while. When news happens in real time, to just be quiet and let things, as I can say, let it play out. Get more information. Because, in real time, we can be deceived. In real time, we may be looking at a situation incorrectly, and we're living within that period. Because, I'm pretty sure, now that you go back and you do the research, Lumumba, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, they had no idea of the depths that the global system would do to neutralize it. And you're right. Even when we talk about the four walls with these or four wall organizations, they are going to be infiltrated. Even when you talk about countries like China, China, for a reason, they have firewalls where they do not allow, outside information from the United States to enter. But once you allow your citizens, your children, to go into white institutions, college, institutions of learning, it changes them. It propagandizes them. Now I'm not as angry with my family members, I just recently had a family member, close family member. Matter of fact, I'm listen. I know, Gus, you say, I'm throwing my mother under the bus. Yes, my mother says she's tired of listening and hearing about racism. Now, it upset me, disappointed me, but it was to be expected. This woman isn't reading. She hasn't, a little bit that I do. I've read King Leopold's Ghost. Every so often I check in with the book read. I've read countless books. I have a little bit more information than she has. So I'm not angry. Disappointed, not angry, is to be expected. Lumumba didn't have a chance. And just like you said, the Congo, if the Congo was, pick a country, I don't know. North Sentinel Island, where they claim that, no present day person can step foot on without getting an arrow in their butt. If there was oil, any kind of natural resource of any significance, those arrow throwing dark-skinned people would be out of there. Again, we have no white friends. There are no white allies. Even if you had white allies or friends, they are not more powerful than people who believe in white supremacy. Period. And that's what the Jim Jones read has shown us, and that's what this read has shown us. I'll close.
Anybody got powerful white friends? Let us know. Maybe you can let us talk to your powerful white friend. That would be even better. Much obliged. Victim in New Jersey. Gave me time to enjoy my smoothie and everything. Love it. Words, so important. There were two portions that were really important in terms of word choice. Well, three really, where she described Lumumba as a betrayal, him going back to try to help his wife who was being abused and terrorized. That's, like I said, curious at minimum, like betrayal. And then that might be a translation too. White co-author, Stanford. She says at the beginning of chapter 22, Lumumba's downfall, she's talking about Joseph Mobutu. Chambe and Mobutu. She said that these two creatures, that the Congo's ruin was prepared. She called them creatures, not civilians, not man, not people, not creatures. I thought that was significant because I don't think she speaks about individuals classified as white in such a savage manner. Even when she talked about the white women and men spitting on Lumumba and cursing him and everything else, scratching his face and everything, she didn't call them savages. He said, I wonder who the savage is. Was it us or them? She didn't say they were savages. Heathens. She didn't say that. She didn't even call them racists, I don't think. Just noting a difference. And even last week, militant, she said she was. The enemies of Africa are Africans. Not all white people are despicable. Again, she didn't even say they were racist. She said not all white people are despicable. Difference. That's what I'm saying. Mobutu is a creature, not a victim of racism. Let's see. And train system of white supremacy. They can train non-white people to and she said he, had been a spy for the CIA and all that. He literally, they could have picked him out, go to school or wherever, and we picked him out of the plantation from age 3. Boy, you're going to be, 1 week groom and we'll use you for, whatever. They do that sort of thing. On the plantation, we figure out different ways to use our boys and gals to maintain the system. Let's see. I got to get to the other super important metaphor. Oh, when she says the Congo's ship, the Congo was sinking, the Congo was dying, and the best of its children was soon to be assassinated. Still the Congo danced. Perhaps the heart was less festive, but the dancing did not stop before the curfew around the crates of beer. The Congo danced. I thought that was important just because it seems a very common system of white supremacy where we just get caught up with distractions and texting, YouTube, Netflix, whatever, Drake, all the rest of it, as opposed to constructive activity, even paying attention to things that are happening, important things that are happening right before our very eyes. Let's see. And the beer, gotta have something to keep us stimulated. Let's see. There we go. She says, pleading for African unity, blah, blah, blah. But there was another truth which could no longer be ignored. No one listened to Patrice Lumumba anymore. His was a voice from the past. He was secretly admired by all. Everyone knew that there was no one equal to this great African, but politically he was dead. Invisible hands were strangling him, and those invisible hands came from far away, very far away. Now see that right there? All those metaphors, what are you talking about? Even scratch, who are you talking about? Far away like where? Are you talking about white people? White people in the U.S.? White people in France? White people in Belgium? If it is, say that. All that, and see, they use that word invisible. Nobody is invisible, man. There's nobody walking around and, what, you can't even see where's Ned? Nah, man. But they use the invisible knapsack. Do you see how often that gets invoked? You can't even, no, man. Individuals classified as white can be seen. They can even be named. It's not some mystical force. When you say far away on another planet, in another universe, in another galaxy, when you say far away, oh, you just mean white people, like I said. It's something Van Meersch and these folks. That's who you're talking about? Just name people classified as white if that's who we're talking about, man. We can't even name them, but we can, that's what I'm saying. We can call Mobutu and Shambe creatures, but we can't even name white people. Let's see. And again, all this, they stopped to talk to people as they were going, and this delayed them, and, whatever. None of that mattered. They could have went as fast as possible. They could have stopped and talked to no one. Lumumba was going to be killed. Period. Didn't matter what they did. It could have happened a little bit later, 2 months later, 3 months later, whatever. It was going to happen. White people had been planning and talking about this for a long. That's one of the things soundtrack to coup d'état. White people had been planning. White people all over the world had been planning and talking about this for a long time. So, you can nitpick a few choices. Maybe he stays an extra day or two, and even from the greater picture, things would have been about the same probably through the course of history if he'd stayed alive or not. We got plans. We got 100-year plans for this region. Like, whatever. It's going to be what it is. We got that cobalt. We got that uranium. We got bombs to make and all the rest of it. We got niggers to control. Psh, whatever. Let's see. Anything else before we get ready to... I think we'll be all done next week. It'll be difficult for me to see us not being able to get through these last few chapters as we get ready to write. Oh, yeah. Yep. All done next week. Gene, look at that. Gene McKellar, a graduate of Stanford University. she lived in Paris, where she was closely associated with Andrée Blouin and many other personalities in the African independence movement. She now lives and writes in Berkeley. She's passed away now. I was just down there. Man, that's all you got to do is say, I'm white. You know, I went down and studied in Palo Alto for 3-4 years. William Shockley, one of my professors. And you can hobnob with all the cool black people in Paris? Come on. Come on, that's militant? That's militant? I'm just asking. That's militant? I'm so militant, I got me a gangster white American woman to co-author my book. That's militant. Not all white people are racist, so I guess Jean McKellar, Stanford's best, I guess she wasn't racist. VGQ, victims guaranteed.
Hey, Gus.
Mm-hmm.
Just one more question before we close. After reading this book, do you look at the Rumble in the Jungle any different? The boxing match between Foreman and Ali?
Oh, totally. Like I said last, I just asked the question, like, what other fights? So how many times do you remember Mike Tyson knocking somebody out in the Congo? How many times did Pretty Boy Floyd get down in the Congo? Sugar Ray Leonard, you pick the person. My man Wilder and Fury, they fought 3 times. How many of them were in the Congo? I don't remember anybody fighting in the Congo since then. Why then? That's the only time. That's the only fight that we're going to have. The only big name fight in any division that we're going to have. And it's at that moment. Show off Mobutu. He can come out like, oh my God, I'd never thought about it in depth, but oh yeah. For lots of reasons, I think differently about, and it's not just the Congo, what was happening, Angola, other parts of the continent at that same time that would allow you to look here and not pay attention to what's happening there. And because you had so many white people who came there for, see these niggers get brain damage. Hey, we got to have security. I read that already. They killed a few, what they said, white tourists, so we got to have more security. That also means we're moving all these resources. We can move resources in, and you would think it's for the fight, and it's really for other purposes. We got other niggers to control in other areas and all that. So, absolutely. And like I said, just, examining all this, apparently other people also think there's something. You think they just had this because Don King wanted to have a fight here? Really? Any hoodles, right. Whatever. Shout to the late, great Muhammad Ali and George Foreman still with us, right on, Black Brother. James Brown, I did play the segment where he did Black and Proud, should have been Black and Dignified, live from Kinshasa. All that for a reason. They haven't done nothing to show off the Congo since then. They haven't had the Olympics there, nothing. World Cup, nothing. People can't even spell Congo. They only take 5 seconds to, we'll go and do an exhibition game in the Congo for old Dikembe. What? Please. Any hoodles. Wrap it all up next Thursday. Maybe get a final word in for Dikembe too. Not that we'll be done with Lumumba, but wrap it all up next week. Folks have thoughts there. Question I guess we can think about for next week. How do we think Andrée Blouin feels about black people? That's one we can ponder on just with comedic creatures alone. You can think how you want about Joseph Mobutu. Did she call any of these white people creatures who are hacking off black people's hands, raping children, torturing black people to make them work in the mines and all this, conspiring to kill Patrice Lumumba? Did she call any of them creatures? Did she call any white people racist in this book? Maybe that wasn't in vogue at the time period. I guess that's not in vogue now either, but, that's just one, I would inquire thinking about. Maybe we can get through a week where people do not throw grandma or ma under the bus next week. Maybe. Nobody will have any criticisms of old grandma or mommy. That's it. We'll be here tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, neutralizing workplace racism. Sobriety. They said the beer, man. We're going to get together and do some beer and gyrating, and it's a shame what they did to Lumumba, but we got to get a few drinks in and dance. That's the same thing we do here. Conditioning is thick, I guess. Man, not being serious about things that are serious. Any hoodles. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. No name calling other black people, no gossiping, no throwaway offspring. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.